Your little meme or your meme cube.
My meme cube. Hello, everybody. So we are here covering an emergency debate about the Emergencies Act, which really should have happened.
This is part two. It happened yesterday, but they canceled it.
Oh, this is okay.
This is part two.
Okay.
Continued from yesterday.
So, and yeah, so is the audio coming through?
I can't tell.
Is the audio coming through? And why is this mic sounding so bad?
Because I think you're... I don't know.
Here, let me fix it.
Because it's set. Cameras there, audio. Snowball? No, it's all set.
Weird.
Maybe your mic's blowing out.
Oh, I hope not.
I wonder if the mic's starting to go. I mean, it's 3 years old.
That's true.
So I might have to get a new one. Hello, Elwin.
Hi, Elwin.
So is this coming in or no? Hold on. I got my audio on. No, it's not coming through.
Okay.
What do I have to do? What do you have to do to fix that?
Let me...
Or do you have to use Safari?
No, you can't use Safari. It has to be Chrome.
Okay. Well, it's the other window, so you're fine.
Hold on, let me anyway, let me figure this out.
You went live in an emergency situation to watch the debate on the emergency situation.
The Emergencies Act is not something we can throw around.
How's that?
It is the absolute last choice when all else has failed. And the future of our country is at stake. The Liberal government and Prime Minister still can't explain what the steps before invoking this act were. When a national emergency is so urgent and dangerous, the government needs extraordinary powers.
We are looking here at an emergency debate, part 2
supporting these sweeping powers
of the
is one of the
emergency
most
debate on the
serious
Emergency
decisions
Powers
a member of
Act,
this House
which
can make.
I think should have
It is
happened,
serious
I don't
because the
know,
use of the Emergencies
before
Act
the Emergencies
impacts the
Act
rights and freedoms of Canadians, regardless
was
of what this government
you know,
says.
enacted. But
Madam
hey,
Speaker, this Prime
that's
Minister
just
loves to
me.
throw lines around like responsible leadership.
Let's see here.
What leadership looks like is standing up for the rights and freedoms of this country. Real leadership is protecting the fundamental principles of Canada and uniting Canadians.
Gay, the audio
Despite
is
someone having
shared.
different views than the Prime Minister, the government should not have the power to limit people's rights. Limiting rights should never happen without due process or
I'm
an
gonna have
urgent
to get a
national
mic.
emergency.
No.
So if we don't have a critical national emergency, then the only way to limit a Canadian's rights should be through due process. Yet
So
this
yeah, we're
government
just
is now
having
using the act to shut down people's bank accounts.
before the lady in
Deputy
his scooter
Director
got
of
trampled.
Intelligence
Yeah.
FinTrack, Barry
So
McKillop, said that there is no evidence that this funding
apparently
in Ottawa is
somebody
tied to
threw something at
ideologically
the horse.
motivated
I
extremism.
don't know though, but
So why are
I
people's
haven't seen the
judicial
video.
rights being shut down? Is the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty just something this government would ignore? Bank accounts are tied to people's lives and livelihoods. A person's support of a political protest should never be a reason to interfere with Canadians' rights.
Ding.
Howard Engel, former Deputy Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Stephen Harper, wrote, quote, "The bottom line is that civil liberties in Canada are more vulnerable today than they were yesterday. And they will remain so as long as the declaration of emergency remains in place," end quote. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association has even taken legal action against the government, saying the Prime Minister's action invoking the act is extraordinary and unconstitutional.
They
go
want
on
to
say
take
that,
action.
quote, "Legal requirements put in place to safeguard democratic processes have not been met," end quote. The Canadian Constitution Foundation has also said, quote, "Emergency legislation should not be normalized.
No, it shouldn't.
The threshold for using the Emergencies Act is extremely high and has not been met," end quote.
Hello.
The World Sick Organization of Canada is also opposed to this act, So has the BC Civil Liberties Association. The provincial governments of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, Quebec, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta have also opposed the Prime Minister's overreach.
Yes, they have.
The situation here in Ottawa never met the level of crisis that is needed to use the Emergencies Act. Invoking this act sets a dangerous precedent.
Trudeau
sends a message to all Canadians now and in the future
put out
that
his
you cannot
reasons
have
either
dissenting opinions
until I think
or
it was
views.
yesterday morning or Thursday morning, and they
the
still
people are
didn't
crying out not to
mean
trample on the
anything.
traditions and beliefs that make Canada great. This Prime Minister has had many opportunities to de-escalate the situation and take a measured approach.
Are you good to go for truck later
today? I've been calling
today?
on this government to lay out a clear plan following science. And again, the Liberal government has completely shut out Canadians, even though 2/3 of Canadians want to see these mandates gone.
Yep.
This is all about mandates, Madam Speaker.
It's
a time for leadership in this country to unite Canadians, no matter what their views are. As members in this place, our first duty is to our constituents.
Trudeau will go down
Listen
as
to them
a
and protect their rights
Marshall
and freedoms.
Hayden type character.
When the people in power overstep and overreact,
good to go for truck.
we
Yay!
risk the rights, freedoms, and democracy that this place represents. This is why I cannot, in good conscience, support the use of the Emergencies Act. Now is the time for us in this House to stand up and find a way to return to a government who isn't divisive.
Make this a confidence vote then, guys.
We need to work together to have a Canada united,
strong,
and free. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Have the balls to make this a confidence vote. This is a motion.
And comments?
There is a motion before the House to declare the confirmation of the act.
St. Margaret's, yeah.
Make this
you,
a confidence vote.
I would like to compliment the member on his excellent speech in this difficult time. I'd like to ask him a question about the actual
mandate's got to go. Yep.
This government passed that led to the invocation of the act that we're debating today. One of the clauses in the act gives the government the power, and I quote, to impose other temporary measures authorized under Section 19 of the Emergency Act as that are not yet known. It's a pretty open-ended power that the government is asking for. And we know that the Prime Minister has limited
Rumsfeld an
respect to this
emergency
House.
powers clause.
He disregarded the request for production of documents with regard to the Winnipeg lab.
I don't know when, but sometime in
the legal system
there might be more powers invoked.
Scandal. So my question is this: why should we trust him? He has not called a meeting of the Privy Councillors sworn into this House to brief them on any security issues. Why should we trust him that this power should be granted to the government, which is
the honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to my very honourable colleague for that question. Look, trust has been completely broken by this Prime Minister because repeatedly he's not only broken ethics violations, but he's gone back on his word multiple times. Trust is the issue here. How can any Canadian continue to trust this Prime Minister?
Yep.
And my honorable colleague from the Bloc in his last questioning also pointed this out with a poll that was recently taken that the small percentage of Canadians trust this Prime Minister now. This is the same Prime Minister that said he would not call a pandemic election.
Yep.
He went around and he went against his word then. He said that he would uphold rights and freedoms in this country. We can clearly see that is the last thing this Prime Minister is doing. Trust has been broken, and this Prime Minister needs to stand up and apologize to Canadians and prove that he's serious.
I do have to ask for other questions. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague opposite for his speech.
You shouldn't trust him. No, you're right, Ellen. We shouldn't. Skeptok says he had been a hero in World War I, then he gave in to the Germans and betrayed his country. He died in prison, so should Trudeau. Yep.
Chief Steve Bell, the interim chief of the police of Ottawa.
Chief Steve Bell, the guy who
all of those pieces of legislation and supports we've got from different levels of government have directly and actively contributed to our ability to ultimately say we are in a position to move forward and to end this demonstration.
We are the Borg.
Someone, a veteran of the police
Resistance
force of
is
31 years,
futile.
has said clearly that this has helped to stop what's happening outside. Can the member comment?
Honourable member of Calgary Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague for that question. Directly and actively, I think this Prime Minister directly and actively forced this to happen in Ottawa because he refused to listen to Canadians and he refused to sit down and listen to views that are opposing of his own. We did not need to get to this point.
No,
this
we
all
didn't.
happened because Canadians were asking for a clear direction and a plan to get out of these COVID measures. The Prime Minister sat on his hands, as he always does, for 3 weeks and made no.
Well, not while this guy's stuck. I'm going to wait for the Liberal person to come back.
This was all the Prime Minister is doing, and we did not need to get here. So the Prime Minister needs to apologize for that, and I wish that that member would stand up and tell the Prime Minister the same.
We have time for a brief question. The honour member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague from Calgary Forest Lawn for his interventions today. I've worked very closely with him on getting supports for the people of Afghanistan. You know, he talked about this as if it is a trucker protest in Ottawa. It is an occupation in Ottawa, but as an Albertan, surely he recognizes that we had a armed militia discovered in Alberta, that we actually had the RCMP threatened, and that they were displaying images of white supremacy and racism. It is not just Ottawa, it is a national issue. If that is not a reason for the Emergency Act, what is?
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn, a brief answer, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague. Look, what I'll say is that all the borders were already cleared up. The provincial government stepped up, the local police stepped up, the federal government didn't, and they already cleared up those borders. What this government did is a complete overreach, and I hope my honourable colleague will find it in herself to do what the Honourable Tommy Douglas did at that time and not support this complete overreach by this Liberal government.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
She's having trouble with this.
Speaker, and appreciate the name. I just wanted to say, first of all, appreciate all Canadians' prayers right now. I've been getting messages that they're praying for us in this place.
They're
we make
praying for
you. Them and we are thankful for them, especially at this very trying time for our country. You know, we're debating today the Prime Minister's Emergencies Act. And we've already heard about the thresholds where they met. The Liberals will argue that they have been. But across the board, across the country, we're hearing that they're not. And clearly, if I read them out to you today, you'd see that they're not. But this is from the Civil Liberties Association of Canada. The current emergency orders place significant limits on peaceful assembly across the entire country. They require financial institutions to turn over personal financial information.
Somebody mentioned Tommy Douglas. Kiefer Sutherland is going to write another letter.
Financial services provided to anyone who has attended
or has
provided assistance to those participating in a prohibited assembly without judicial oversight. In the light of all these violations of civil liberties,
Harry Potter
that we will be taking the government to court.
All students
the
must
Civil Liberties
remain
Organization.
3
And
feet
I guess
away from
this
each other.
becomes a great concern for that mother or grandmother that donated $20
groups.
for the cause of freedom for this for the truckers convoy. What started off as a simple protest for truckers mandates has developed into something much larger, into a defense of freedom in Canada. So that the grandmother that's donated $20 is she on some Liberal list now that can't travel after this? We don't know. We don't know how far and why this act will take what the Prime Minister is trying to do. But I figure, it's important that we often refer to the freedoms, but let me read them out. Section 2 of our fundamental freedoms. Everyone has the following fundamental freedoms. The freedom of conscience and religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication, freedom of peaceful assembly, and the freedom of association. Further, Section 6. Every citizen of Canada has the right to enter, remain, and leave Canada. Section 7. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the security of the person.
I've never wanted a character to catch on fire more than Umbridge. That's saying a lot if this is feeling like Harry Potter.
Everyone has the right to be secure against unreasonable search or seizure. And number 9, everyone has the right
Yep,
to not
the
be
Monty
arbitrarily
Python's little
detained
old
or
lady's
imprisoned.
voice is hilarious.
And, we see the Emergencies
Oh my
Act
God,
really allows
Ellen,
the Prime Minister
when
to kind of
is
push those
Krista
aside to do
Freeland
whatever
not
he
on
wants.
bridge?
But,
Especially when she's like,
some ask me, where, how did we get here? And that's the question I would ask
Just-
all Canadians. How did we get here? This is the Prime Minister that has been leading up to this. This will be his crescendo, Madam Speaker.
I need to somehow make a figure out how to make
the
a
Prime Minister's values
comparison.
test
Like,
that was given to summer student jobs a number of years ago in 2017. December, the government introduced an attestation that if you didn't adhere to his beliefs or his values, the funding wasn't going to come to you. I remember many times fighting this in my MP office,
seeing as
that all,
CTV
members
put
of
out
our
an article
community would have
breaking
access to those summer
breaking
student
down
jobs.
what city
Over
gave how
1,500
much.
applications were
It's
denied
only a
because they
matter of
didn't meet
time
this
before
values
names
test.
are posted.
Even
Yep.
March 19th of 2018, we tabled a motion.
This is why
The
we
MP,
don't
which I can name
donate
him in
or
this room,
support
former
movements.
Liberal MP Scott Sims voted
Yep.
against it, and he was put on the backbench because of that. This is this Prime Minister. This is 4 years ago. We've seen this.
When the
developing for many
members of
years
the
now.
legislature have to read the actual law
I guess,
back to the
Madam
leaders,
Speaker, I think
just
what
wow.
Canadians are becoming
Yeah,
sadly
Skep, that's
aware of is
pretty
this is
much
really who the
yeah.
Prime Minister is. I wrote a column a couple weeks ago, and this is the quote from the actual Prime Minister's mouth. This is a man that's supposed to unite the country, not divide it. They are extremists who don't believe in science. They're often misogynist, also racist. It's a small group that muscles in, and we have to make a choice in terms of leaders, in terms of the country. Do we tolerate these people? Now, this isn't from some far left-wing or far right-wing individual. This is from the Prime Minister's own mouth. This is the person that's invoking the same act that we're debating today, and it's shameful.
The thing about Canada is
talk
it's very, very
and
gay.
some would ask why. It would seem to make more sense to unite the country.
There's
than
only a
divide
matter
it.
of time before the
Well,
government
here's an
starts
article
blocking
from
social
Goldstein.
media
Trudeau
accounts.
can't
Yep.
unite us because his strategy is to divide it, Madam Speaker. This is what it's all about.
Parliament Secretary to the Government House Leader, and I imagine it is about the use of names.
That's right. It's not like it's the first time. It's the second time the members made reference to it, and he does know better, I'm sure, not to be citing specific names inside the House.
Yeah, I remind the honourable member that we do not use members' names, titles, or
Fuck you.
constituencies.
Here, I'll try not to do it again. So I'll get to the Prime Minister's, again to the article, Goldstein. The Prime Minister can't unite us because his strategy is to divide us. This is from the article. This because the Liberals, they divided Canadians up into little slices of political support and opposition across the country in order to extract the maximum number of seats from the minimum
Hello,
amount
Asia
of
Research
votes
Director
cast.
at Hello
So
Costin.
this is all the design. The
The
Prime
South
Minister,
Park
he ran
gay,
on sunny
you mean?
ways. Certainly, we were hopeful that at least we had lost that election.
Ah,
we had hoped that at
says
least he
the
would be a
guy
positive
hiding
Prime
with
Minister.
Thai
But what we've
femboy
seen,
Turk.
Madam Speaker, over the last 4 years is a Prime Minister bent on dividing the country.
I love that.
Shamefully
Neat.
bent on dividing the country.
And where
From
is Mr.
riding
Prime Minister?
into
That's a
office
very
and the
good
promise of sunny
question,
ways, the Prime
Pancalo.
Minister Justin Trudeau's embrace of identity politics
Oh no!
has led to an
He
incredible
read
failure
the
of
name
governance,
again.
resulting
Oh
in him
no,
becoming
he
the fourth
read
Prime
the
Minister to
name.
invoke the Emergencies Act or its
Now he's
predecessor,
gonna get in
and
shit.
notably the first to do so outside actual war or insurrection. It is a shocking fall with the witch's brew of wedge politics and
Hiding
competence
under
and
furniture.
identity politics to blame. Madam Speaker, I'll go on. Then imperceptibly at first, the great scourge of our political age began to make appearances within the Trudeau Liberals, identity politics, with a
Member names, please.
He's
just
reading!
reading quote, Madam Speaker, my apologies once more.
He's
With
reading!
astonishing speed, opponents
He's
of
not-
the government action
Oh my
could
God.
quickly be labeled as
He's
racist, misogynist,
reading!
homophobic, or any other
He's not
litany of insults
freaking
intended
doing it.
to personally scar
Oh
opponents
my
and discredit
fucking
them
God.
as the worst society has to offer without addressing the substance of their argument. Madam Speaker, I think we're debating the Emergencies Act today, and it's come to this culmination by design by this Prime Minister. This is what he wants to
Supernaturalism, I
happen.
don't believe it.
This is from the Sunny Ways Prime Minister that all
I
that
love
voted
that
for him were
too.
hopeful
Hiding
that he
under
would be
his
the
mommy
unifier,
wife's
great unifier
skirts. Yeah.
of our country. Are a bunch of truckers or peaceful, freedom-loving Canadians, are they the problem today, Madam Speaker? They are not. the Prime Minister and his Emergencies Act is, and the act needs to be defeated. I call, especially on the NDP.
Make it a confidence
We're
vote.
in opposition to it. My hope is that Liberal members from across the way will oppose
moron.
it as well. There needs to be 20 more members of the NDP that vote against this for it to fail. For the sake of our democracy in this country, it needs to. And I call on them today to do that. Canadians across the country, we hear you. Again, we appreciate your prayers and your emails and your communications of concern. You know, we take our responsibilities in this place very seriously. And that's why we're here this weekend to debate this very act that, again, threatens that our very institution. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Come on, NDP. This is your time to shine.
Again. Questions and comments. The honourable member for, I am really sorry, Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you to the honourable member across the way for your intervention. And I'd like to thank you for actually quoting the Prime Minister this morning and quoting that when he made those comments about the types of people he was talking about. He was referring to a small group. And I would like to ask the member why it is that since the beginning of this debate, you have consistently on the other side of the House.
Member to direct the questions through the chair, please. I haven't said anything.
Please explain why, if in fact the quote addresses that he has given says that the Prime Minister wasn't referring to a small group within the organization, why the party opposite continually says that the Prime Minister was referring to all the people and the protesters and the truckers that we all support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
I'm shocked by what that member actually asked me. She's basically saying is justifying the Prime Minister's comments. So whether you're, and the reference was to people that had vaccine hesitancy, we call it, right? So what she's saying across the way is it's okay to call them, they are extremists who don't believe in science. They're often misogynist, also racist, with a small group that muscles in. And we have to make a choice in terms of leaders, in terms of the country. Do we tolerate these people? My goodness, Madam Speaker, the fact that she would actually defend that statement in this House. Maybe she should get a copy of the Constitution and the fundamental freedoms and study them to understand what our freedoms are. That's supposed to be for every Canadian in our country, not just the ones who choose to do what the Prime Minister chooses to do.
Well, member for Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, on a point of order.
Yes, the member opposite is addressing me directly, Madam Speaker.
Oh,
He's also
no!
calling to question whether I have any knowledge of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Please direct the questions through the chair. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Saanich Silence.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. To my honourable friend from Prince George, I'd like to begin by agreeing with him. It's always nice to find common ground. I was one of only 3 members of Parliament on the opposition benches who voted with his party condemning the use of the specific phrase he mentioned in the summer grants program. I remember clearly that vote. I felt that was a misuse of grant programs by appropriating into language that was elevated to charter language, something that could be seen on either side as within the scope of the charter. I am still undecided as to how to vote on this motion, but I do wish that we could have, and I'm looking to my friend because he is my friend, for ideas for how we could lower the temperature in this place so that we don't descend into hurling insults across the way. Canadians don't want to see that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the member's comments. And then there's an old phrase from the Bible, and it says, "A calm answer turns away wrath." And I think in this place we do need to bring.
Are we really bringing the Bible into the government
so that we don't encourage things to get worse?
Did you just bring a quote from the Bible?
It's all our responsibility to be that way, and that's where I think this act only seems and not seems, but is fanning the flames. And we need to do our very best to bring peace to our country again, unify our country again like it really wants to be, and really God keep our land glorious and free, and that's what we're all striving to do. Thank you.
Jose, commentaire. The honorable member for, really sorry, Edmonton, and I'm going to, yeah, Wetaskiwin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm pro-vaccination, but I have friends, constituents who are not. They make a different decision, and you know we've had conversations about that, and can't convince them. Many of them have reached out, and
you can't convince them.
Aren't anymore. They've lost their job. I talked to more than one person who had to give up their house because of it, and they're coming to us saying, "What do we do? What do we do?" And then on top of that devastation, they have a prime minister who referenced them. Many of them are misogynist and racist. That's been mentioned. My question to the member is, because I'm sure that he's heard from people in that same devastating situation, is, you know, what impact would it have if the prime minister would simply come back and say, you know what, I spoke too strongly, I got it wrong, and then heard their concerns? What impact would that make to the
They need to break out into a hockey fight.
Chance to answer in 10 seconds. The honorable member for Prince George, Peace River, North of
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Great question. And you know, this place, it's often a place of contention, but it needs to be a place of forgiveness too. And if the prime minister was to come, and we've given him that opportunity, I even called in a column that he just apologized. I think a lot of people are like that. They just would accept a simple apology.
No, not anymore. I don't think so.
Prise du débat, l'honorable député de Trois-Rivières.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Je suis contre l'application de la loi sur les mesures d'urgence. Je salue le travail des forces policières qui ont démontré un calme et un professionnalisme remarquable. J'espère que cette occupation illégale se terminera sans violence. Plusieurs manifestants ont fait le choix raisonnable de quitter. Un groupe d'irréductibles est toutefois encore sur place, possiblement extrémistes. Ils sont ceux qui sont venus pour occuper et non pas pour manifester. Il est prévisible qu'ils sont difficiles à déplacer, mais rien de cela ne justifie l'application de la loi sur les mesures d'urgence. Pour appliquer cette loi, l'invoquer de l'appliquer, il y a au moins une démonstration en 2 temps qui doit être faite. 1, il y a une situation dangereuse et urgente, et 2, il est impossible de faire face avec les lois actuelles. Je ne crois pas que ce soit le cas. Face à une telle situation, je pense qu'il est important de faire la différence entre une exception, qui est une chose qui arrive une fois, qui ne se reproduira pas, et un précédent, qui est un élément qui est censé se partager. Je mentionne tout de suite que je partagerai mon temps avec les
Pincalo, you're right.
Merci beaucoup du rappel subtil.
Pincalo says y'all are more fucked than us, Gunny. Our bullshit is in the open. Yours is all cloak, dagger, and no-show. Yep.
Pour ma part, je crois que l'invocation de la loi sur les mesures d'urgence, c'est une conséquence directe d'un immense manque de vision et de leadership. Face à ce constat, il faut poser la question, pourquoi en sommes-nous rendus là?
No, apologies won't work anymore. I agree with you. Asia Research Directorate. I agree. Apologies are long past what will work.
J'en conviens également.
I think that this needs to be made a confidence vote, and this needs to be, he needs to go. The funny part is, says Pincalo, so far at least 3 officers have crossed sides. Yep.
C'est à ce moment que l'occupation s'est transformée en occupation permanente. Était-ce là un manque de vision du premier ministre, de l'insouciance, de la désinvolture, un manque de leadership? Qui sait? Afin de comprendre
in the lives you can hear, do not attack the police over and over. Yeah. And I've been listening to them with Pincalo.
Because I think that there have been former decisions taken that were just as unfortunate.
D'un avenir où la transparence serait de mise, où le Canada reprendrait sa place sur l'échiquier international. Rappelez-vous, on est en 2015 et Canada is back. Décidément, un vent de fraîcheur soufflait et nous laissait espérer des jours meilleurs. Le premier ministre rencontrait des leaders du monde, il faisait la une des magazines People et le monde entier admirait son look de jeune premier et ses chaussettes colorées.
Hey, can I jump on for 2 minutes top?
La population canadienne
Mais tout n'était pas rose.
Um,
En janvier 2017, le commissaire à l'éthique
I promise I
a
won't
enquête sur les
hijack
vacances
the
lancées
show.
par la famille Trudeau sur l'île privée
Let's
d'Agacan.
see. Let me see if
Enquête
I
qui a
can.
résulté en un blâme de la commissaire à l'éthique.
Hold on.
C'est la première fois qu'un premier ministre était blâmé par le commissaire à l'éthique. Le rapport Trudeau 1, lorsqu'il y en aura d'autres, était une première honteuse pour un premier ministre.
Le député de
And
ne
was
pas utiliser
recommended
les noms
by the
des collègues.
ethics commissioner.
Tu as fait raison, c'était le nom du rapport.
Yes,
Parfait.
Madam Speaker, but
À
this
la
is the
suite de
name
ce
of
blâme,
the
le
title
premier
of the
ministre a tenté
report,
de
rather.
justifier l'injustifiable en
This was the
répondant
first time a prime minister had been
avec une
censured by the
dérobade que
ethics
nous entendrons
commissioner, a
souvent
shameful first
à
for a prime
l'avenir.
minister.
Je suis désolé,
In
je
response
suis
to this
responsable, je ferai
rebuke,
mieux
the
à
prime
l'avenir.
minister tried to
Je m'assurerai
justify
de
the
faire approuver mes
unjustifiable
vacances par le
and
commissaire.
said
Attends, s'il vous plaît, on rappelle au règlement
that he
de...
was sorry.
Madam
I'm
Speaker,
sorry.
to my colleague, I think this is
On a
out
point
of
of
order.
order?
We're talking about the Emergency Measures Act. We are not talking about an ethics report from some time ago.
Are you serious?
Of leeway to allow the member to make his point. Est-ce que je peux finir de parler, s'il vous plaît? Je réponds
Really?
à la députée que
So,
l'honorable député a la
To the
chance de
honourable
trouver
member?
un contexte, mais qu'effectivement,
The
nous sommes
honourable
en train
member
de parler
made
sur
sure
la
that
loi
in context.
Wow.
mesures d'urgence.
Okay.
Absolument, Madame la
Please
Présidente, je
back
suis
to
tout à fait
the
d'accord.
Emergencies Act.
Les éléments de contexte que
Of
j'amène
course,
ici
Madam
visent à
Speaker.
tracer
Well,
une ligne qui,
I
pour
want
l'instant, est tracée à la ligne pleine et qu'on peut voir les pointillés, simplement.
draw a line,
Je vais
That's all.
abréger sur la ligne en question.
but I will.
Un peu plus tard,
I will let
le
that go.
Premier ministre a toujours été dans l'actualité
little
éthique
later,
avec l'affaire SNC-Lavalin.
The Prime Minister was in the news again
À la
with
lecture du
the
rapport, on a su-
SNC
The,
Lavalin.
the lady that was run over by the horse. Yeah, I think somebody threw something
Again,
at the
the
horse.
ethics
Pour moi, c'est de l'évitement.
commissioner
Encore là, il était responsable de rien.
reprimanded the Prime Minister.
Ça s'est poursuivi. Cette ligne-là, elle est
Things
continue.
continue.
C'est ce qu'il faut bien
This
voir.
whole line of conduct
En
continued.
2020, le cabinet fédéral a choisi We
In
Charity pour administrer
2020,
la
the
bourse
federal
canadienne de
cabinet
développement. Du bénévolat, on le
selected
sait tous.
We Charity to administer
Puis,
the
il y avait des
Canada
liens
Student Volunteers
entre We
Awards.
Charity, notamment avec la famille du Premier
The
ministre,
decision
ses
raised
enfants, son
questions
épouse, son
about the
frère,
charity's
ainsi de suite.
ties to the Trudeau family.
Le premier ministre n'a pas fait l'objet de blâme dans cette situation-là.
The
Mais
Prime
on connaît quand même la
Minister
suite
was not
de ce qui s'est passé.
censured for
Tout
this,
ça, je
but,
l'amène pour dire ceci.
but I'm
C'est que le
bringing
Premier
this
ministre a
up to say
une
this.
relation trouble avec l'éthique, une relation trouble
He-
avec le concept de
Turk,
justice.
Turk, I've
Seems to have a problem with
check your
concepts
messenger.
of just and
C'est que
justice.
Just remember
le
not
Premier
to come in
ministre,
with
par
your
exemple,
like
cité
real
que
name
j'ai
again.
abrégé,
The examples I
a
cited
démontré un manque de jugement flagrant.
showed a
Et ces manques de
flagrant
jugement-là, c'est
lack
pas ce
of
qu'on attend de la part
judgment.
d'un leader.
Yeah.
That's not what we expect
Vous
from a
savez,
leader.
même jusqu'à récemment, lors de la journée de la vérité
Even
nationale de la
recently,
réconciliation, le Premier ministre choisit de faire du ça plutôt que d'aller rendre hommage
National
à
reconciliation,
une
the
population
Prime
qu'il avait
Minister
lui-même choisi d'honorer.
wanted to pay tribute
Hey, can you hear me?
C'est des manquements de jugement.
First
Et encore
Yes,
là,
we
c'est
can.
pas
Here
tout à fait ce
again,
qu'on
he
attend.
lacked
Okay, so
Jugement, à ce jour,
he
c'est la
lacked
première
judgment.
we had a
Again,
fairly
J'ai
now
seulement
again,
afin de
protest.
démontrer un fil
bringing
rouge.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry,
religious
I've got a
Ce
lot
fil
of
rouge pour moi
There
sont
is a
les erreurs
kind
de
of
noise in the
Hold on.
background.
It's
Let
my
me turn
it's
it
the
down.
stream.
But,
all these
Or it's
religious
the
offenses.
yeah,
let me
yeah,
mute.
yeah.
Hold on.
So I'm no I'm an
Oh.
expatriate. I
As
used to
someone
live in
who's
Canada.
sexually
I no longer
worthy
do.
of
Right.
L'institution du
And
Parlement.
a couple of years ago,
Minister, the
I think it
institution.
was 3 or
Aucun
4
à la
years
fonction du
ago,
Premier ministre.
But let's look
our
at the
president
Prime
was
Minister's
accused
job.
of
Au début du mandat. Le PM doit comprendre
The
que
Prime
corruption.
Minister has to
and
understand
Mépris envers
half the
l'institution du
country
Parlement,
marched
les
on
manquements d'éthique
Seoul.
que j'ai cités, donc,
Oh wow.
l'audace de déclencher
Half
des
the
élections non
country,
nécessaires
away
par
in
over
Parliament.
20 million people marched on Seoul, and there was
Activement
no
dans
action
He
whatsoever
should
by,
protect the
well,
people.
there was action by the
Sur les
police
mesures
to keep it
d'urgence,
safe, to keep it
ont décidé par
To
les
invoke
provinces
this
Right.
controlled, to
Attempt
to
make it so that people knew what's okay, what's not, and
Right.
it was mostly nonviolent. 3 people died, but you got to keep in mind that over 3 people died out of, I think, 20 million protesters.
That's a lot of people.
That is a
To
whole
march on one
fuckload of
place.
fucking people,
Yeah.
right? And we got rid of our president for 3 or 4 or 5 even months. We did not have a president.
Wow.
Now, these are truckers. We've got about how many? 200, 300, 400 trucks, and then it's about like maybe 10,000 truckers. And we got to call in the military for this. These are
Yeah.
truckers.
Yeah.
And
This is sad.
you know what's really embarrassing to me? I always thought like I wasn't born in Canada. I'm an immigrant.
Right.
I've talked about this before. I'm an immigrant, And I've always been very proud of how much freedom and how much kind of a liberal ideology Canada has afforded me. And how it's allowed me to do some things that other countries wouldn't. How I'm allowed to be silly. How I'm allowed to be, I'm allowed to do, you know, like silly little things. I'm allowed to make gay jokes. I'm allowed to ride my bike down a hill and then flip it over when I'm a little kid. And then nobody goes, hey, why the fuck are you riding that bike there? Canada has always afforded me so much freedom, so much love. And now, under Trudeau, apparently you're not allowed to park your fucking car in a certain place. And if you do, they will freeze your bank account.
Yep.
Like, how is this?
Member from Trois Rivières. Just
how is this?
No charter rights.
How is this Canada? I don't even understand it. And again, I'm not there.
This is not the War Measures Act. It's much
I don't know what it's like on the ground. Maybe these guys are awful. Maybe Trudeau is fucking fighting terrorists. Maybe these guys got pipe bombs in every fucking garbage can. I don't see that from where I am.
The Bloc on Monday.
There are some dumbasses like Pat King is kind of a.
So then the government
like I've actually heard some of the shit that Pat King says,
and to the municipalities to help deal with the situation.
Like,
now the Bloc, of course,
it's
against
bad.
it. And what I think
but
they're missing
there are
is this.
definitely
it's not just
way
about
more
it's about
people
what comes next. Because
involved
some of the key organizers of this
that
protest
don't
have
think
said
the way Pat
that they
King
intend to
or
set up
Chris
shop
Berber
elsewhere.
or
Does the
Tamara
Bloc not agree that
Lynch
having
do.
discretion
There
to
are
its
a lot of
police force
people
like
who
the
are
SQ
involved that just want this shit to stop
Quebec, other key
and
junctures
want
in
us
their
to go
province
back
is
to
not
normal.
a good thing
That's
because the
all
Bloc
they
normally
want.
loves
Now, there
discretion
are
for
some
provinces,
like
except
I
now.
said, like Pat King and that who have said, you know, oh, let's take him out with bullets, blah blah blah, like stupid shit like that. And that's not helpful.
If Turk February showed up, let's just imagine Turk February showed up to the protests and he said, I want to kill all the, let's pick a race that's not going to be offensive and not going to get you canceled. If I showed up and I said, let's kill all the Eskimos, like, you wouldn't associate the movement with that. That's nonsense.
Yeah,
that's absolute nonsense.
Yeah,
you can't associate one fucking weird guy.
No, absolutely not.
He is a very honorable man.
It's an insane idea, and from what I've seen, these protests have been exceptionally peaceful, exceptionally. And now they're saying they're using children as
shields. Yeah.
No, they're not. They're just hanging out with their kids. They're having hot
trying
dogs.
to teach their kids about peace, like their rights. That's what they're trying to do. Like that's what most of them are trying to do.
That's the thing, man. Like liberty.
This is a very broad concept.
It's
concerning.
Justin Trudeau. It has become, and I know this sounds like it's an exaggeration, but Justin Trudeau has become the first true dictator of North America. He has put in martial law to make it is just horrific to me. I'm not there, so I don't have to suffer through it. But I am scared for you guys, for the opinions you have sometimes expressed. Because guess what? Maybe with these powers, he's going to come after your bank accounts next. And it's not fair to any human being, let alone
and we have a number of different individuals
somebody
that are
who is
from not only
simply
business,
expressing their wants, not their need, their wants for freedom.
Yeah.
And why has the Bloc abandoned?
Oh my God, is this guy really going to say that
the Francophonie population for the Windsor and Essex County area?
Wow.
Oh, is chat shitting on me?
It's the Windsor guy.
That's fine.
No, I'm just also trying to react to what's going on in Parliament. But
all right,
seen Alex. No,
really, all I wanted to say is fucking Canadians. those who are still in Canada, you guys still have your freedom. You still can act on this. And I'm not saying
thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my
anyway
colleague from Trois
other
Rivières
than
his speech,
you know,
and
let
also
your voice be heard.
him and his
Let
colleagues for
just
their
fucking
speeches,
go honk
which
honk.
clearly indicates that
Sometimes
this
enough.
government hasn't shown any
Just
justification
let
for why this
fucking
should be
Trudeau
coming
know
forward
he's
and
no longer
imposing this upon Canadians. And
he's no longer
and
wanted.
control of
I'm
this
sure they've heard
situation.
from their constituents
He's
just as
no
I
longer
have
in control of this
about the
country, and he is
non-confidence
no
that is
longer
out
a
there on this
leader.
Prime
He
Minister
is
and his overstepping
nothing
bounds that
to
he's
us.
doing with this
Nothing.
movement, and he's picking and choosing what's
That's it.
going on.
Okay.
Awesome.
And as a
Thanks for
concern,
coming on,
as being
Greg.
mentioned
Stop
in the act, is the fact that it's opening up doors
Oh, I
for
hope I
financial
just heard the word
implications.
confidence.
And the reality is
Peace.
that when we see
Peace, man.
the Prime Minister choosing his choices, I guess the question when we look to see is, are there
Hey,
concerns in
Wikipedia
Quebec that
snippet.
this could be extrapolated to other groups and other organizations within Quebec, just like it happened with the Coastal GasLink in.
Il faut que je donne à l'honorable député de Trois-Rivières 15 secondes pour répondre.
Je suis tout à fait d'accord qu'il faut y faire très attention. Des lois de ce type-là peuvent servir le bien public. Elles doivent être plus précises et celles-ci ne rencontrent pas des critères fondamentaux.
Where is it here?
Prise du débat, l'honorable député de Rivière-des-Mille.
Is it
Madam Speaker.
Is it the picture-in-picture or the?
Le siège et les blocages. C'est clair. J'espère qu'on ne remettra pas ça en question. Puis d'autre part, moi, je refuse de jouer le jeu des libéraux et des candidats. Excusez-moi, des députés du NPD.
Is that what I need?
Je trouve ça immonde. Bref, ne me demande pas d'accepter candidement l'application de ce décret démesuré.
Oh, picture-in-picture is what I need? Okay.
Les libéraux ont déployé comme un écran de fumée devant leur incompétence et leur gestion boiteuse et piteuse de la crise. Ce gouvernement, et plus particulièrement son premier ministre, a donné le gaz pendant 3 semaines. Et puis, pour les mots de mon leader, ils ont tout à coup lâché la bombe atomique, c'est-à-dire la loi sur les mesures d'urgence. Notre rôle en tant que parlementaires bloquistes, c'est de défendre notre monde contre ces mauvaises décisions du fédéral.
I really hope that they
Agir
make
dans la
this a
mesure où
confidence
estive sans
issue,
prendre
because it
en
needs to
compte
be.
la vie du Québec, c'est une très mauvaise décision.
Yeah. Very
Ce
poor
gouvernement-là avait à cette
decision. Yeah.
disposition des forces de police qui étaient capables, qui étaient outillés pour agir. Malheureusement, ça s'est fait trop tard. Comme mon chef l'a dit, c'est bien évident qu'un camion stationné sur une voie publique, sur les lignes blanches, ça peut durer 1 minute et demie, mais ça enfreint déjà, après 1 minute et demie, une couple de lois. Parlons-en des lois existantes. L'article 430 du Code criminel stipule commet un méfait quiconque volontairement empêche, interrompt ou gêne l'emploi, la jouissance ou l'exploitation légitime d'un bien. Ah ben, regardons. 2. Empêche, interrompt ou gêne une personne dans l'emploi, la jouissance ou l'exploitation légitime d'un bien. Ah ben, notons qu'un bien ici, ça peut renvoyer à
This
une
guy has a
route,
weird
un
speaking
tunnel.
pattern.
Le droit de manifester est reconnu.
Didn't even
Cependant,
talk to the
cette
truckers.
manifestation
Nope.
peut être déclarée illégale dans plusieurs cas. Par exemple, la loi 23 du Code criminel, l'article 23 du Code criminel stipule qu'un attroupement illégal est la réunion de 3 individus ou plus qui, dans l'intention d'atteindre un but commun, s'assemblent ou, une fois réunis, de se conduisent de manière à faire craindre pour des motifs raisonnables à des personnes se trouvant dans leur voisinage cet attroupement. Soit qu'ils troublent la paix tumultueuse. Ah ben, regardons ça. Soit par cet attroupement, ils ne provoquent
Uh-oh.
et sans aucun
I'm out of coffee.
raisonnable d'autres
No.
personnes à troubler, bon Dieu, j'ai de la misère aujourd'hui, à troubler tumultueusement la paix. Regardons encore une fois. Monsieur le Président, ces 2 types de méfaits constituent des offenses et ont été perpétrés de manière continue depuis 23 jours. À un moment donné, la liberté individuelle,
This is this is like very like this is important. I don't think the last time I remember watching a debate in the House of Commons was it might have been the gay marriage thing.
On February 10th. Ottawa demandait 1800 policiers supplémentaires. Le fédéral en a envoyé 275. Bon, pas si pire. Par contre, ils ont principalement été affectés autour du premier ministre et du Parlement. Dans les faits, il y a 20 policiers supplémentaires qui ont été ajoutés dans la rue auprès des manifestants. C'est gênant, c'est honteux. Donc, le jour 16 de l'occupation, le premier ministre se réveille tout à coup et lance cette fameuse bombe atomique. La loi sur les mesures d'urgence. En invoquant cette loi, le gouvernement se dit justifier son usage. Alors, parlons-en des justifications plutôt que de l'absence de ces justifications.
This is like the quietest I have heard the House of Commons
Ruiner littéralement les manifestants
in quite a while.
And associated entities. Avez-vous vu les manifestants partir avec leur queue entre les jambes suite à ça? Non. On parle tous d'un cas qu'on a vu à la télévision avant-hier, je crois. Le seul cas que l'on connaît, le seul cas vraiment répertorié. Les manifestants sont restés plus déterminés que jamais, désormais persuadés de vivre dans la dictature.
They keep calling him a dictator. It's great.
Ils ont provoqué et continue de provoquer. L'économiste écrivait que cette loi risquait d'empirer la situation. Il me semble que c'est en plein ça.
Like members of parliament are actually calling him a dictator. This is what needs to happen.
Support logistique aux remorquages. Bon. Les remorqueurs de la région ne voulaient pas, semble-t-il, utiliser leur système pour remorquer les camions. Si le gouvernement avait regardé en dehors de la capitale nationale pour faire venir des remorqueuses, il y en aurait trouvé et il n'y aurait pas eu besoin d'un député. Vous savez, M. le Président, si on a une grosse tempête à quelque part à Sherbrooke, là, avec des gros dommages, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Ben, il y a du monde du Saguenay qui vont descendre rapidement pour venir nous aider. C'est comme ça au Québec, en tout cas. Un appel à l'aide, ça résonne de loin. Il faut juste le demander. D'ailleurs, le Bloc québécois a offert de former une cellule de crise multipartite dès les premiers jours de l'occupation. On voulait s'y attaquer de façon concertée et efficace. Le premier ministre a pris son temps pour finalement dire oui. Il s'est ramassé dans un
zing,
il a dit oui. Le Bloc québécois et veut toujours aider à sortir de ce bourbier, de cette crise merdique. Or, la réalité du terrain, c'est que la police fait déjà
there are a lot of parliamentarians that are not happy with this, and I really wonder how many people are going to be swayed by this.
Autant de policiers et de ressources que cela le nécessite. Comme ambassadeurs et à compte toute proportion gardée, bref. Je parlais il y a un instant de solidarité. Madame la Présidente, permettez-moi d'exprimer ma reconnaissance à l'endroit des gens de la Sûreté du Québec qui est venu prêter main forte à nos voisins ontariens. Je voudrais aussi témoigner ma profonde admiration aux 7 corps de police présents dans la ville d'Ottawa depuis vendredi et qui font un travail absolument extraordinaire pour déloger les assiégeants. Professionnels, méthodiques, efficaces, moi j'ai juste des fleurs à leur lancer. Peut-être au passage, le NPD est peut-être aujourd'hui
I think people thought he was done.
peut-être en train de reviser sa position et on le souhaite parce qu'il y a juste les fous qui changent pas d'idée.
Appel au règlement de l'honorable député de Longueuil, Charles Lemoine.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Le membre de l'autre côté savent très bien qu'il n'y a pas le droit de mentionner l'absence ou la présence des membres.
Oui, merci de rappeler.
Thank you.
Est-ce que... Non, mais je vais demander à l'honorable député d'attendre que son micro s'allume pour s'excuser, s'il vous plaît. Merci.
D'accord, madame, j'ai compris, donc je ne parlerai pas de l'absence des députés du NPD.
Je rappelle à l'honorable député qu'il est en train de renforcer la notion de ce qu'il vient d'apporter. Donc, s'il vous plaît, de retirer ses propos sans autre commentaire. Merci.
C'est délinquant, je m'en excuse.
Rappel au règlement de l'honorable député de Windsor-West.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We all know that you can't do inadvertently what you do overtly. And members of the NDP are here, just like other members are online as myself. And so that's just irresponsible, Madam Speaker, and it's a cheap parlor trick.
Effectivement, c'est ce que j'ai effectivement redit à l'honorable député de Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. On reprend.
J'ai retiré mes propos.
I withdraw my remarks. I don't know if the microphone is on, Madam Speaker. Yes, I withdraw my remarks.
L'Association des libertés civiles a annoncé qu'elle contesterait cette loi en cours, c'est-à-dire la loi des mesures d'urgence. Le groupe a affirmé que le gouvernement disposait déjà des outils nécessaires pour faire face à la situation, que ce décret était inutile, injustifiable et aussi inconstitutionnel. Nous sommes tout à fait en accord avec vous. Amnesty International
Oh, wow, Amnesty International.
Demeurant vague. Des flous qui pourraient entraîner des abus de droit, notamment en ce qui concerne la limitation géographique. C'est un peu ça qu'on martèle depuis jeudi. Madame la Présidente, cette loi, elle est démesurée.
That's crazy that Amnesty International has stepped in to say something.
Elle ne devrait surtout pas inclure le Québec, pas plus que les 6 autres provinces.
Of course it shouldn't include Quebec.
Cette loi ou ce décret pour l'instant. Je suis entièrement d'accord avec mes collègues libéraux, par contre, que le siège doit être démembré le plus rapidement possible et malheureusement, on l'a dit, on l'a répété, mais
she's having a lot of trouble this chick shouldn't be translating. She always has trouble.
Cette loi, le dernier recours, fait peu pour régler la situation actuelle, mais fait beaucoup pour décrédibiliser le Québec et le Canada à l'international. Elle fait beaucoup pour menacer une liberté qui devrait nous être encore pleinement acquise. Cette loi n'a absolument pas l'appui du Bloc québécois et c'est regrettable que nous ayons à passer 3 jours à traiter de cette loi. Vraiment triste, alors qu'en plus, présentement, nous assistons à l'extérieur au démembrement des manifestants. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Questions et commentaires. Questions and comments, the honourable member for Humber River, Black Creek.
Madame la Présidente. To my honorable colleague, I have to say that I want to acknowledge the province of Quebec and thank them for intervening and helping us.
Thank you, Quebec.
We have outside, but also this is a national problem. This is not the only issue that we're dealing with, is what's happening in Ottawa. And we're dealing with issues from one part of the country to another. And that is why we need this Emergency Measures Act. And I'd like to know if my honorable colleague is supportive of having the SQ continue to help us, as they are helping us very importantly outside right now.
Absolument, Madame, que la SQ aide l'Ontario ou la Colombie-Britannique, c'est quelque chose d'extraordinaire. Nous sommes solidaires. Vous serez d'excellents voisins pour nous et nous continuerons d'être solidaires. C'est clair. Maintenant, si on lit les mêmes journaux, Madame, il ne se passe pas grand-chose à l'extérieur d'Ottawa. Il ne se passe vraiment pas grand-chose. Tout a été en principe dissous comme manifestation, comme barrage.
This is insane.
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Merci, Madame le Président. Juste hier, le ministre de la Justice a révélé que les dispositions financières de la loi sur les mesures d'urgence
Why do people who can't speak French speak French?
Car réellement l'outil contre le crime. Can you imagine living in a country like Canada where a law or an act is designed
Maybe that means the whole country is upset.
Beat down political dissent on the part of the opposition parties, and that could include the Bloc Québécois, for example. I'm interested in the members' comments on that.
Le député de Rivière-des-Mille.
Écoutez, vous m'ouvrez une porte encore une fois. Là, ce matin, j'ai posé la question, je n'ai pas eu de réponse. On parle de finances. Le décret souhaite à quelque part
seeks, to some
comment
extent,
dirais-je,
how would I put it?
intervenir auprès des finances personnelles des camionneurs.
Yeah, that's a
Sauf que
that's
ça
a
donne pas
polite
les
way to
résultats
put it.
escomptés.
Yeah.
Et pour
To
moi,
the expected results, and to me,
ça
this
ne se
is
fait pas. La question que j'ai posée ce matin,
shouldn't be
c'est
done.
de
The
dire,
question I asked this morning
parfait,
was
vous
to
gelez des
say,
comptes
okay,
bancaires, vous les gelez
you
pour
are
une
freezing bank
semaine,
accounts for a
un
week,
mois,
a month,
combien de temps?
how much time?
Est-ce que ce geste-là,
And
ça affectera le
will
crédit de
this
ces
affect
gens-là?
these
Parce qu'on va
people's
mettre des
credit?
gens à la ruine carrément.
Because we're going to ruin people.
Questions commentaires. Questions
and
and comments. The
comments.
Honourable Member for North Island, Powell.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for his intervention. And I also appreciate working with him on the Veterans Committee and appreciate and respect his opinion, and also appreciate that I sat through the speech and, of course, was in his shot the majority of the time. I'm just wondering if the member could answer through you, Madam
What does
Speaker,
that
a
even
very
mean?
important question. I do agree in some parts of his intervention.
What does that even
really
mean?
around the fact that this government took too long to respond, that we didn't see action and they should have had action. All levels of government failed. And here we are today having a debate on something that I wish we did not have to have a debate on because they didn't do their job. But we also know that the Canadian Civil Liberties Association is suing the government, which I do support. I think it's absolutely important that we have those systems in place to make sure that everything that is done well and accountable. I'm wondering if the member agrees that this is a good step and that the committee to oversee this needs to be set immediately. Thank you.
Oh, another committee. Another committee.
À saisir précisément la question.
I didn't quite get the question.
Mais regardez, on peut... J'en profiterai peut-être simplement pour demander aux gens du NPD de vraiment réfléchir. Les gens du Parti
Why a committee? Why do we have to have committees? More and more committees. Just do something.
C'est la loi que nous nous apprêtons à adopter ou non, veut pas, elle nuira aux travailleurs. Elle nuira aux travailleurs. Les travailleurs, c'est la cible, c'est la clientèle des non-démocrates. Alors, c'est ce que je dirais simplement sur l'intervention. Merci beaucoup.
Reprise du débat. Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's an honor to represent the constituents of Kelowna Lake Country. Friday, the 13th of March, 2020 will be forever in my memory as the day we closed Parliament due to the coronavirus pandemic declaration, and we all made our way home. In response to the pandemic, the Liberals brought forth legislation where at the 11th hour, they added in clauses which would have given the finance minister unchecked power to tax, spend, and incur debt with no budget, no debate, no parliamentary oversight for 21 months. After weeks of not sitting, the Liberals finally introduced a dramatically reduced Parliament for the next several months, where MPs could ask questions, but other parliamentary abilities such as opposition day motions and emergency debates and many other daily functions did not occur. This was a crossroad in history for our democratic institution and was going to operate during this world crisis at that time. Conservatives strongly pushed back on giving the government ultimate financial power. And in May 2020, I flew back to Ottawa and was standing in this House of Commons debating these issues. My speech garnered national media attention as a rookie MP who was passionately standing up for democracy. I feel like we are in a similar situation with these Liberals going directly to the most extreme power. It is not stated enough that Canada is a great country. Democratic government, equality, rule of law, some of the strongest human rights and environmental laws, a safe and civil society, job opportunities, social networks, civil liberties, and freedoms. It's important that we protect these, and they are the reason why so many people want to visit and move to Canada. People have fought for the freedoms and country we call home. And we need to ensure that we have laws to protect all these and the governing structures that uphold our laws. Prime Minister Mulroney saw the armed standoff in Oka. Gunfire was exchanged, individuals tragically lost their lives. Prime Minister Chrétien saw the skies of the world close with 9/11 and the threat of terrorist violence at higher levels than any other time in our history. Prime Minister Harper saw the financial markets of the world collapse. And we saw the terror attack on Parliament Hill with a life lost.
Yep.
In January 2020, protesters blockaded our rail lines and highways, bringing trade and rail passenger service in Canada from coast to coast to a standstill for a month.
Yep.
As well as shutting down ferries off the coast of British Columbia.
And no emergencies.
In 2020 and 21, the coronavirus pandemic brought our healthcare system and economy to its knees. In 2021, my province of British Columbia was devastated by floods, mudslides, and wildfires affecting tens of thousands of people. None of these crises brought any federal government of the day to invoke the Federal Emergencies Act.
No.
To be clear, Conservatives have no issue with dialogue with Canadians seeking to protest peacefully. But that right to protest cannot include blockading infrastructure such as rail lines or border crossings. Free-flowing critical infrastructure is the law of this country, and we must uphold it.
Exactly.
The government has falsely insinuated that Conservatives have been inconsistent on this.
Well, actually, I was going to
party
ask you
that
if
has
you
been
could
truly
sit here for a minute while I go to
has
the
been
bathroom and
the
get more
Liberals.
coffee.
During the extensive rail blockades of 2020, due to protests, the government sent delegations to talk to those involved. And law enforcement from many jurisdictions used the various tools and laws available to them to end the rail blockades. Just a few days ago, on February 17th, reports of substantial damage surfaced on the Coastal GasLink pipeline in BC, an area that's seen protesters. There were attempts to set a vehicle on fire with workers in it. Attackers wielding axes, flare guns fired at workers. Equipment, hydraulic and fuel lines cut, causing dangerous leaks. Extensive damage to equipment and property, and people throwing smoke bombs at police. Where are the Liberals on this situation? The Prime Minister appointed a law-breaking professional protester as Environment Minister.
Yeah,
their hypocrisy could not be clearer. When the Prime Minister agrees with the message of a protest, he opens up dialogue and maybe even perhaps attends. When he doesn't, he name calls, scolds, and demands his government be allowed the same powers as if we were at war. The words of the Liberal member for Louis-Hébert continue to ring true, that when it comes to the Prime Minister's government, wedging, dividing, and stigmatizing is the way they choose to act. The Prime Minister's recent false accusation that members in this House stood with a swastika is the most recent example of callousness. His refusal to apologize
to a Jewish member of Parliament too.
It's so disappointing to see this from the Prime Minister.
He said that to a
There are many
Jewish
people who
MP.
came here to Ottawa from across the country who are law-abiding and peacefully protesting, wanting to be heard, including from Kelowna Lake Country. Canadians know that when it comes to hateful imagery, language, intimidation, injury, or damage, those individuals need to be held accountable. Every member of this House denounces these, and there are laws to address these. The good news for Canadians is that our laws work and are seen to be working, and protests have been peaceful. The border crossing at Coutts has been cleared, the Ambassador Bridge has been reopened, among others. Provincial governments and local police forces have been able to act with the laws that this Parliament and provincial and municipal governments across the country have. And 7 out of 10 provinces have come out against using the Emergencies Act. The order in council released by the government authorizes itself to impose, quote, other temporary measures authorized under Section 19 of the Emergencies Act that are not yet known. Well, what does that mean? Just trust the Prime Minister and give him ultimate authority with no oversight?
No, thank you.
It also stated the emergency exists throughout Canada. That is not true. It also requires financial institutions to cease dealing with designated persons, defined as anyone associated with a protest. What does that mean? It's extremely vague. What if you shared a tweet? It's being reported that financial institutions are unclear what this entails. There appears to be broad discretion for the government. Invoking the Emergencies Act as a national emergency does not meet the threshold for its justification. The choice of this government to seek to use the powers of the Emergency Act is not for lack of options. It's the result of lack of leadership from this Prime Minister. His government has been left embarrassed and now seeks to break glass on the most severe law. Canadians are frustrated and they're seeking hope. And Conservatives tried to offer this government just a week ago the olive branch to do that. We put forth a motion calling on the government to light the way for the end of COVID-19 restrictions and mandates. We wanted the government to tell Canadians, 90% of who are already vaccinated and millions more boosted, the plan when this will be over. Provinces are doing it, other countries are doing it. We asked for a plan, and the Liberals and NDP refused to give one. They voted it down. My constituency office has never received so many emails and phone calls as over the last 2 weeks. These are not form letters.
What's wrong? I really
Thousands
gotta
of
go to the
people from
bathroom.
Kelowna Lake Country, many who have never reached out to their member parliament before,
You're
are
eating?
supporting the
Yeah, I'll be
Conservative
right
motion
back, you guys.
to have a mandate-ending plan, and they're not supporting the Emergencies Act invocation. Here's just a brief sample of their comments. Quote, I used to be so proud to be Canadian, now I'm not. Quote, I'm an RCMP member 13 years and it saddens me to see what's happening in this country. Quote, I notice the Liberals are wanting to follow the money with the truckers blockage. I'm wondering if they're now willing to open up the We Contravene and follow the money in it. Quote, 3 weeks of peaceful protest and zero willingness from the Liberal government to listen to those upset and sick and tired of mandates. Quote, under the Emergencies Act, Canada's financial institutions would be granted the power to freeze anyone's account without a court order. This is the most assuredly a brazen attack on our freedom of expression and cannot be tolerated. Enough is enough. Quote, if it's only a fringe minority, then why invoke the Emergencies Act? Quote, I'm a veteran of 20 years, and right now I'm very disgusted to what is going on. Quote, this is not the Canada I know, and the Liberals across the way are chirping at me and they're laughing at the comments from my constituents in Kelowna Lake Country. For people to consider for the next election, here's a quote from Prime Minister Harper, as retweeted by our current Prime Minister. Almost a decade ago, quote, when a government starts trying to cancel dissent or avoid dissent is when it's, it's rapidly losing its moral authority to govern.
Exactly right.
Madam Speaker, I've looked at this motion, done my research, listened to people, and heard my Kelowna Lake Country constituents. I absolutely cannot support confirming the Emergencies Act. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Comments, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Speaker.
I take great exception to the terminology that this member uses when she says phrases like these Liberals, those Liberals. Well, I can assure her these Conservatives are nothing like those Conservatives like my predecessor, Flora MacDonald, who actually introduced this bill into this House. The member wanted to reference quotes. She brought up a lot of quotes. I got a quote for her from Police Chief Steve Bell, who said, without the authorities that we have been provided through this legislation, these pieces of legislation, we won't be able to work together today. Can the member explain to us, Madam Speaker?
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Coming from the party of law and order, somehow encourages the activity out there and won't take the words from the police chief running this.
Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The reason why we
I
are
love
here
how
today
she's so
is
calm
because
and
of
the
the
Liberal
failures
guy was
of
like,
the leadership of the Prime Minister and the government. We continually asked, what were the steps that you took to bring us to this point? And continually we had no answers. What was the first step you took? What was the second step? What was the third step? What was the fourth step? This is an extraneous situation. And we have been given no information what all the steps were taken by the federal government to bring us to this point. The first step could be to maybe talk to people and listen to people. And there has been nothing done to bring us to this point today.
Yep.
Les commentaires, l'honorable député de Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix.
Why are our writings so goddamn
Merci, Madame la
long?
Présidente. Je remercie ma collègue pour son allocution. D'abord, vous m'en voudrez de prendre
our
quelques secondes pour
writings are
saluer
so
l'exercice,
freaking
le
long.
courage, l'audace et le grand jugement des diverses interventions de sécurité qui sont sur le terrain en ce moment, en face du Parlement. Mon conjoint
The liberals remind me of kids having a meltdown at recess. Yeah, Ellen, you're not wrong.
Un petit moment, s'il vous plaît. Can I have order so we can actually hear the questions? Order!
God. Damn.
Honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
The honourable member from Kingston and the Islands just used an unparliamentary term referring to another member as an idiot. I would like him to apologize, please.
I didn't hear, but the honourable member from Kingston and the Islands.
I'm happy to apologize for that comment.
Yeah, they
Madam
kicked
Speaker.
her
It
out.
is true.
They're
I did say that I do
the
apologize for it,
different
but I will
French-speaking
recognize the
people
fact that the member from
have
Barrie said the same
different-
thing.
No, the Speaker of the House.
The honourable.
No, this is this girl, this woman. She's been here this whole time.
We are not going to enter debate on this. L'honorable député peut poursuivre sa question.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Alors, je salue l'exercice de toute l'équipe, des 7 équipes qui sont sur le terrain en ce moment. Et je réitère à Madame la Présidente que je ne pense pas qu'il n'y a aucune personne dans ce Parlement qui mérite d'être traitée d'idiot. J'aimerais demander à ma collègue, comme le Premier ministre a dit lui-même à plusieurs reprises que la loi ne s'appliquerait pas là où elle n'est pas nécessaire, comme il y a 7 provinces, incluant le Québec, qui n'ont pas besoin et qui ne souhaitent pas que cette loi s'applique. Pourquoi
Hello, it helps not having a nuclear reactor right next to the playground.
Sa motivation?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for her question. And just in reference to what occurred a few minutes ago, it's obvious that it's not only the Prime Minister who likes to use names when he's calling people, so it's a liberal tactic. To answer the member's question, absolutely, it's part of this act is that provinces have to be spoken to and have to be consulted, and they were, and clearly, overwhelmingly, they are not in support of this Emergencies Act. 7 out of 10 provinces. So that says something in itself. These are governments that have said we do not believe that that this is needed at this time. And so what the Prime Minister has done is completely ignored that, gone his own way. And
do you think adults who run a country would have better manners? You would.
I would like to thank the member for Kelowna Lake Country for her intervention. The conservative messaging has been fueling misinformation and minimized clear, overt violence. The fact that they use the terrible examples of history, such as victims from the Holocaust, as a sword is deplorable. Misinformation of this magnitude leads to growing hatred and violence to our communities, and it is wreaking havoc without consequence. Can the member answer why they continue to minimize the violence invoked by these extremists whom they've posed with?
Remember for Kelowna Lake Country.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for her question and her intervention. On this side of the House, I'm not familiar with anyone that has taken pictures with people waving swastikas and other things like that. So that's just that simply hasn't happened. And part of this, I mean, we have to realize that, as I mentioned in my speech, that there are people that have views and that have said and done things that are absolutely deplorable, and we denounce those. That is not everyone that is involved. I've walked the streets here talking to people that are teachers that have had enough with
manners are for other people,
children that have such mental health problems they just can't handle it anymore. People that have lost their jobs, everyday people that
we have to resume debate. The honourable member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's certainly a privilege today to speak on behalf of the people of Miramichi Grand Lake. Madam Speaker, this speech, in 14 years of my life in politics, this speech kept me up at night. It caused me to consider so many different angles of what is truly happening. But it took me back to some traveling I did as a young adult.
That one flag on day one is there January 6th.
France.
Yep.
I lived in South Korea, and for a time I stayed in Rome for 1 month. While in Rome, I studied ancient history. We learned about the Emperor Nero. We learned about how when Rome was burning in the year 64, he let the city go up in a blaze, and historians often pondered whether or not he played the fiddle while it was burning, because he wanted to create a new palace amidst the ashes, and he blamed it on a small fringe minority of people called Christians. I learned that in ancient history.
Well done,
in the afternoon
sir.
On that study trip, we studied modern Italy, and I learned about how the Italians were so thankful for Canadians for being liberated during World War II.
Yep.
I attended a ceremony in Tyville in Normandy in 2011, and I spoke on behalf of the province of New Brunswick, and I witnessed the tears in real time of the people that lived on Juneau, of the first houses liberated, and the respect they have for Canadians to this very day. When I lived in South Korea, Madam Speaker, I was walking down the street one night late. It was a 12-hour difference, I believe. I called home, and there was an old man. He was drunken, and he cursed me out because he didn't like the sound of my voice, because I was speaking English, and what I realized later, he thought that I was an American. Some friends of mine who are Korean walked up to the man, told him to be kind to me and that I was Canadian. I didn't understand the language they were speaking. The old fella could barely walk. He was intoxicated. He walked up to me and kissed me on the cheek. He called me a Waguk, which is a Canadian to a South Korean. And he thanked me in his own language for what our ancestors and veterans did in the Korean conflict. Awesome. So it's not lost on me the respect our country has around the world and how we achieved it.
Until now.
But the question here today, Madam Speaker, and it's an important one. We all believe in freedom. We all know how we achieved it. But we have to ascertain what it means to each and every one of us. If you're listening in Miramichi Grand Lake, and if you're watching here today, I want to tell you that there's a difference between an emergency and an invocation of the Emergencies Act. The act used to be called the War Measures Act.
Yep.
It was brought in World War I.
By Robert Borden,
World War
I
II,
believe.
and by then Prime Minister Trudeau in 1970, and what then leader of the NDP, Tommy Douglas, called basically a gargantuan oversight by an ineptitude government.
Yep.
So for the fourth time in our history, and now under a new name, the Emergencies Act, I need you to realize that this act was not brought in under 9/11, under Prime Minister Chrétien. It was not brought in when Alan Legier, serial killer, terrorized and horrified Miramichiers on a murdering rampage that no one will ever forget in my community. It was not brought in the natural gas, shale gas demonstrations on Route 11, which saw millions of dollars of seismic equipment destroyed. And it saw 8 police cruisers bombed with Molotov cocktails while the people that managed the protest stood there with machine guns. When the RCMP was called to make it end, it ended, and it ended abruptly. And it did not end with what we used to call the War Measures Act. It did not end with what we now call the Emergencies Act. And I will ask you something else. I'll state a fact. I'm vaccinated. My wife is vaccinated. My kids, many people I know are vaccinated. Many people I know are not vaccinated. I believe it's a personal choice to be vaccinated. And I don't believe the leader of the nation should vilify those who've made the personal choice.
Absolutely not. That is not his job. That is not his
believe
job.
in that. And I want to ask you something else. For those of you that are following at home, today's speech is not about vaccinations, though. And it isn't even about mandates anymore, Madam Speaker. It's about whether or not we bring the Emergencies Act in to move protesters, dissenters of the Canadian public. And I wonder about my own security, Madam Speaker. I walked through that every night for 14 days, in the dark, alone, 20 or 30 below zero, without anyone escorting me. So if this was a national crisis, who is protecting me, I must ask? The only way to find a cab was through those unlawful people, as mainstream media would have you believe. They asked me
The
if I wanted to
protesters
choose
aren't
bigger.
going to get... See, this is the thing, shouting at clouds. There
make
are
this up,
officers that
Madam
are
Speaker.
crossing the
You don't
line
have to agree with the
stand with them.
protest.
Like, this
You
is...
don't have to agree with why they're doing it. But you do need to see...
I don't think
that
we're
when the
going to see,
bridges and
like,
rail
mass
routes and trade routes were
freaking
blocked,
mass
they were
murder or
moved
anything like
almost
that. I
instantly.
don't.
How did that happen?
I don't think it's going
How
to
did
happen.
all these other issues that happen on our jurisdiction get solved? They got solved by decency, Madam Speaker. They got solved by prime ministers that didn't go run and hide in their own house while their own country was in turmoil from a crisis started by the prime minister himself.
Okay, The horse
My
thing
constituents, if you're
was
wondering,
provoked.
I didn't run home and hide.
They
I was
didn't
one of the
just
first
like
members of parliament
send a
in the
horse
country
in to
walk
trample
up to a
somebody. The
transport
horse
and talk
had
to some
something
truck
thrown at
drivers.
them.
They were from Alberta.
And
It
the
was
lady
Saturday,
is,
January 29th, before the
from what
convoy
I've
even
heard,
hit
she's
Parliament Hill.
alive still.
Most of them were
Yes, she
vaccinated.
has
They
does
were
have
protesting
injuries,
freedom.
but
They believe their
like,
freedoms are being taken away.
yeah.
How did sitting on the back of a flatbed with a few truck drivers
Then I think of
make me a
Kiefer Sutherland
racist,
reminds me of the
misogynist
show
member of
24.
parliament? How did the member from Thornhill, whose family experienced
Mass
the
murder
Holocaust,
is mass
get called a
paperwork.
racist and a sympathizer? The government of Canada, Madam Speaker, has been labeling Canadians for many, many months. He's traumatized Canadians using divisive language, using constant wedge issues, resulting in the outright stigmatization of the Canadian identity. And the Prime Minister won't apologize for the labeling that he's done. He's hurled insults at everybody who disagrees with him. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister has used the following language and expressions to further traumatize Canadian citizens. These people, unacceptable people, people who hold unacceptable views, racists, bigots, terrorists, misogynists, and people that take up space.
Unbelievable.
People that take up space, Madam Speaker, I'd like to think that all of us are allowed to take up a little bit of space in this country that we call Canada.
Well, it's not illegal for me to have free speech in Canada because I have a live stream going up right now talking about what's going on, and there are not police at my door demanding I shut it down. So,
freedom of speech.
yeah,
and the diversity
no,
of
it's
opinions. We
yeah,
all have a
no.
relative in our
Sorry,
past who fought for
I
the
love you
freedoms
shouting
we
at
share
clouds,
today.
but
They sacrifice for the
that's
right to have different
incorrect.
opinions from government and to live free in that perspective.
And the
Dissenting
fact
voices are
that this
part of our
government is
democracy
the fact that
leave
this
you with the
debate is
following.
going on right
I'm
now,
against the Emergencies
and the
Act because
fact
it's
that
an
it's
overreach,
public
freezing
being
bank accounts.
broadcast
It's
shows
something they
that
do in
we have
communist
freedom of
states,
speech.
Madam Speaker. And I leave you with a verse from the Bible.
Because if we really, really
Philippians
didn't have
2, verse
free
3,
speech,
4.
this wouldn't be
Do nothing
published.
from rivalry or conceit,
There would
but
be
in
no
humility
opposition to
count
the act.
others more
There
significant than
would
yourselves.
be, yeah,
Let
no.
each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. This is the Canadian way. Canada has always witnessed to the world as a nation of peace and justice. It's time we witness that again while we're here at home, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
It's a selective right
I see that the member is following the lead of the interim leader. The lead of saying that this is all about encouraging the protests.
Dude, why do you sound so
illegal
angry?
blockades. It's about putting it on the shoulders of the Prime Minister. Character assassination, Madam Speaker. That's what we've been hearing today coming from the opposition benches. When Canadians are concerned about the economic costs, the costs to our communities, the shutdown in Ottawa, what's happening in our blockades,
No,
the
I'm not
Conservatives
saying these
continue
I'm saying
to want
this
to
guy.
have character
The
assassination
government of
inside
the House.
chamber.
He's
The
like,
past blame on an individual. The question to the members, will he not recognize
yeah, it's the
that the
parliamentary
sense of urgency is
secretary or
there?
whatever.
Even the interim chief of Ottawa is using
He's like
the legislation that we're
fucking-
debating today. There's an emergency declared by the city of Ottawa and the province of Ottawa. Get on the right page, Madam Speaker.
The province of Ottawa? The
Madam
province
Speaker,
of
I want to
Ottawa.
thank the member opposite for his question. And I want to remind the member opposite that when this issue started, the Prime Minister,
province
rather than being a
of
reasonable,
Ottawa.
measurable, responsible Prime Minister in our
The
country,
guy just
think
said
of
the
Gretchen,
province of
Harper,
Ottawa.
Mulrooney,
What the fuck?
think of people from our past. They would have reached out to those dissenting voices. They might have broken bread. They may have shared a
Resting
coffee,
asshole
and they may
voice.
have had a disagreement.
Breathe,
but they
man,
would have put
breathe.
in an effort to reach common ground, and I believe this would have been over at least 2.5 weeks ago.
Josie, come out there. Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
I'd like to thank my colleague for his intervention in the House today. You know, he spoke about when he was in South Korea, he told a personal story about how he had met someone who was happy he was Canadian, not American. And I can't help but reflect on the fact that we are seeing misinformation and disinformation happening all around the world. Much of it is by Russian bots. You know, you can't be online for 2 minutes without being attacked by Russian bots right now.
It's not all Russia's fault.
What we have also seen is that there's misinformation being spread on places like Fox News that has been amplified by Republicans like Ted Cruz. And would he not agree that when conservatives spread that misinformation, when conservatives stand and get their photos taken with extremists, that they are in fact raising that misinformation and that disinformation in our country and making us more like that divisive politics that we see in America?
Honorable member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
Madam Speaker, I appreciate the question from the honorable member opposite. Full disclosure, the Americans are my friends too. That was part of my story. But what I will tell you here today is I never met with extremists. And the government is trying to make this a liberal versus a far right wing agenda issue. It's not. This is about whether or not Canada wants to be similar to a communist state. This isn't about liberalism anymore.
No.
I went to a liberal arts university. These are communist, socialist agendas. And I met with a transport truck driver who provides for his family. And she may have trouble with Fox News. She's voting for the censorship bill of trying to censor what Canadians can see online and what they can write online.
Yep.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for South Shore St. Margaret.
The member in his excellent speech on this debate on this act talked about the need to actually reach out to people and hear what people have to say. One of the documents that's tabled with the proclamation that the government tabled is called a Report to the Houses of Parliament, Emergencies Act Consultation. So it's actually a list of all the meetings that the government had required under the act prior to this, to try and establish whether or not they did steps 1 and 2 before the last resort, as the Prime Minister
I
said,
never met
Emergency
with
Act.
extremists.
When
I saw
looked
them
at it, I
coming
can't see
and
any
ran
steps
for my
1 and 2
life.
other than meeting with themselves in cabinet meetings. They never met in this list, not once, with a Canadian outside of the government. So I'd like to have the honourable member's position with regard to
it's a G7 issue now.
And hearing people before you resort to such a draconian act.
Member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
I'd like to thank my honorable colleague. I think what we're seeing here, Madam Speaker, is, and it's what I was trying to say earlier, and it goes to the very question that I'm being asked right now. A prime minister he or she who was reasonable would actually reach out to the organizers and attempt to have a conversation where potentially common ground could be found. Other jurisdictions were already loosening mandates. We wouldn't have been different from many of those in the free world. But the difference was the Prime Minister, like the WE scandal, hid in the cottage. Like the SNC-Lavalin scandal, hid in the cottage. Like the blackface scandal.
In the main debate, the honourable member for Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
I love how she just cut that off.
Est-ce qu'il est là?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would like to advise you first of all that I'll be splitting my time with the member from Willowdale. Madam Speaker, I am addressing you today in support of our government's invocation this past week of the Emergencies Act of 1988.
Of course you are.
I would normally tell you, Madam Speaker, that I'm pleased to address this House. But today I am not pleased. Today I'm not pleased with the siege against Ottawa's residents who have borne the brunt of the illegal occupation of their neighborhoods. They have been living in fear that their apartment buildings may be torched by arson, fear on their walk to work or to the grocery store of being harassed, taunted, ridiculed. I'm not pleased for workers in Ottawa's downtown core, including the Rideau Centre, who have not been able to earn an income for 3 weeks now. I am not pleased for the business owners who had hoped to reopen after Ontario lifted its restrictions.
You're telling me that people can't actually get into the Rideau Centre to work?
Shutter their businesses once again because of threats, intimidation, and abuse by occupiers. I'm not pleased for my staff, prevented out of fear and intimidation from going to work. The parliamentary precinct should be a safe place. Now it is not. These are
where
everyday
has there been
Canadians who
any
are
attacks
impacted by
on you
this
guys?
illegal occupation. I'm not happy for them. I'm not pleased that these illegal occupiers prevent our day-to-day interactions, and I am
But
not
they're
pleased
not
that these
preventing
innocent
them.
bystanders
You're
are experiencing hardships because of this
you
illegal
chose
activity.
to stay home and be
I'm
online.
sad
There
for
are a
those
lot
who
of
have had to
people that are
undertake
in that
abuse,
building, and they seem to
harassment,
be just
and
fine,
ridicule
dude.
for following public health measures put in place to help protect our citizens and our healthcare system. Our doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers are exhausted. I thank them. And I'm sad for the hits on our economy.
Yes,
First
a vote of
hit
no
hard by the
confidence,
pandemic
Lindsay.
itself,
That's
and
what I
then
keep
again
screaming.
by the illegal whack-a-mole blockade spurred on by this
Make
siege
this
in
a
Ottawa.
confidence
But
issue.
it's not only Ottawa that's hurt, it's Ontario hurt, for example, by the blockade to the Ambassador Bridge, forcing auto plant shutdowns and others. It blows to the economy in Alberta, where I was born and raised, in Manitoba, and in my now home province of British Columbia, due to illegal
No, they don't,
blockades.
Lindsay. You are absolutely right. They do
Madam
not
Speaker,
care.
I know that people are tired of public health restrictions. So am I, and so is pretty much everyone I know. I know that this pandemic is exhausting. It is challenging for all Canadians. It has been and will continue to be difficult for everyone. That frustration extends to the 90% of British Columbians who have rolled up their sleeves to receive the vaccine.
Wait,
Yet
is it
such measures
90% of British
continue to be
Columbians or
essential
90% of
to reduce
Canadians?
risks
Which
for our
is it?
seniors and those who
It can't
are
be both.
immunocompromised, and to bring this pandemic eventually to
No
heal.
panic was right.
I support BC's measures approach in removing restrictions when and where possible, based on the state of the pandemic in the region. These actions are founded on good public health advice by highly qualified and experienced medical and public health practitioners. We must continue to listen to our public health officials so that we can continue to protect Canadians against this insidious disease. And that means protecting our healthcare systems and following public health guidelines.
This thing that's
nobody likes so-called vaccine
98%
passports,
survivable, but
most
you
certainly
guys
not
are
me.
making out to be like
But rather than
smallpox.
seeing them as a divisive instrument, as many have chosen to do,
Sorry
they are
guys, I'm
really
in
an
pain. I need
opportunity
to have a
that
smoke
allows our
break,
businesses
but I
and our
will
economy,
turn this
and
way.
indeed travel as well, to open up and carry on in a limited way. Instead of having to completely shut down from time to time, as we had to do before we had
insane.
such an
Like-
abundance of tested, effective, and safe vaccines.
Then why do we need
But
this
they are
Emergencies
nonetheless
Act if we have
artifacts
all of
of the
this
pandemic.
stuff?
And they, as for the other pandemic-related measures, will abate in due course when the pandemic itself abates, not by merely wishing them away or demanding that the pandemic be ignored. These are trying and emotional times, and it is in these most trying and emotional times that lawful,
Nobody
legitimate
is demanding
protests
that the
and sincere
pandemic be
concern have
ignored.
been overtaken and overwhelmed. It is
We're
in
saying
these most trying and
it's
emotional
been
times
2
with
years.
frustrations and tempers running
We
high
have all of
that
these
we have seen
things in
this
place now.
unfortunate siege
It's
of
time
Ottawa
to ease up
unfold,
restrictions.
as well as many
That's
sympathetic
all that we're
whack-a-mole
saying.
protests and blockades across the land. And it is in these most trying and dangerous times, because of the inability of services such as the Ottawa Police Services and the Ontario Provincial Police and others elsewhere in the nation, to take the kinds of actions up to now, that are even now underway, to bring the siege to a peaceful conclusion. With resources made available and confusing authorities clarified because of the Emergencies
Canada is
Act.
the canary in the coal mine for
Our
complete
government took
globalist
this bold
control.
step this
Yep.
week to ensure that law enforcement is adequately resourced to end the illegal occupation peacefully and safely, so that yesterday we finally started
A
to
lot
see
of these guys
happen
are daily
what for the last
crossers.
several
Yep.
weeks most Canadians
And Carlos
wanted to
says,
see
try
happen. Removing those involved in these illegal
having
occupations
to say
and
you had
restoring
to wait in
peace
quarantine
and a safe city in which
for
to live
up
and
to
work.
2 weeks after doing your last
But it
run.
is paramount, Madam Speaker, that Canadians understand what this act does and does not do. It is critical to
The thing
understand
is,
the measures
Lindsay, is that
deriving from the
because the
Emergencies Act
People's
are
Party of
specific,
Canada kind of
focused,
split off
and
from the
proportional,
Conservatives, the
and
Conservatives
crucially
have less
time-limited, and
people.
with
So
adequate
what needs to
democratic
happen
checks
right now
and
is the
balances.
PPC
A
and
key
the
to this is a
Conservatives need to
built-in
kind of
30-day
reamalgamate,
sunset clause,
and they
and
need
that the
to
measures are subject to
kind of put
ongoing
their
oversight by a
differences
parliamentary
aside for the
committee,
better
with
good of
Parliament
Canada
maintaining its
and
right to revoke
just
the
kind of
declaration of emergency
like
as it
get
sees
get
fit.
Trudeau out
Furthermore, a
and
public inquiry to determine the
get
circumstances leading
get
to
themselves under
and
control,
measures
get
taken
Trudeau
during this
out, and get
unprecedented
this
emergency
country back
must afterwards
on the right
ensue.
track.
Most significantly, the Emergencies Act does not involve the military, nor does it in any way suspend the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and this is explicit in the Act.
Also,
These
the
rights
NDP are for
particularly
some
include
reason
peaceful
backing
assembly,
this. Yep.
freedom of expression, and the right to life, liberty, and security. The preamble of the Emergencies Act
I
is
think
crystal
this
clear
guy
on this. Let me
is
quote it.
a
And whereas the governor and
this
council in
Port
taking such
Coquitlam
special
guy. I think
temporary
he's an
measures would
NDP.
be
He's either
subject
an
to the
NDP or a
Canadian
Liberal.
Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Bill of Rights, and must have regard to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, particularly with respect to those fundamental rights that are not to be limited or abridged, even in a national emergency. Madam Speaker, as a long active member of the Tri-Cities chapter of Amnesty International, I fully respect and celebrate the Canadian reality that all Canadians have a right to protest, to speak their minds, and hold their elected representatives accountable. Yet even so, when we talk about rights, it must be clear that we do not have a right to block critical infrastructure like highways and hospitals. We do not have the right to
What
intimidate,
would the real
threaten,
Fidel
or
Castro
bully
do
our
in this
fellow
situation?
citizens,
Ah,
nor to deprive them of safe enjoyment of their homes, nor to disrupt their work or their businesses. And let me just mention that attempting to
if they
intimidate us with
were
a manifesto demanding the
not
removal
an
of Canada's
unofficial
elected
map, they would
government
be
is
pecans.
patently
Yeah.
absurd, has no basis in any law anywhere, and is not
Those three
democratic.
parties together are
This
why
is
we are in
foolish
this
anarchy, if
situation.
not
Yep.
bluntly seditious. But it is a far cry from anything resembling the freedom that the siege purports to proclaim. I know that most of those who support the protests themselves, whether or not that includes the blockades, are not anarchists or extremists. Most are sincere, everyday Canadians who are frustrated with restrictions. I get that, and I sympathize.
Are you
But
sure?
unfortunately, harassment and threats continue. And it's also clear that these linked events right across the country have been infiltrated by groups of white supremacists, Nazi sympathizers, Islamophobes, anti-Semites, and other garden variety racists or bigots or extremists. And they leave an ugly and indelible taint wherever they're involved. An excellent example here is the seizure in Coutts in recent days of a significant cache of weapons held by individuals tied to extremist organizations. And dangerous behaviors like the man who drove a lifted pickup truck through a police barricade at Peace Arch Crossing. And there are more. But
Then what?
these
Okay,
and
then
other threats
name them.
underscore the embedded
You've
presence
named two
of small,
things.
systematized, and perilous groups willing to intimidate and commit
If there are
violence
more,
to
name
achieve
them.
their own objectives, which typically don't reflect respect for our people, our rights, our institutions, and do require our heightened vigilance. Yet even with the Emergency Act in effect, I must emphasize that people can, of course, still protest.
But
and
they
can
can't,
certainly
though,
still
right
disagree
now.
with the government. But they cannot join bloc.
And the honourable member will have to complete his thoughts on the questions and comments. Questions and comments, the honourable member for Oshawa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my
The dirty
colleague, though I am
schwa.
extremely disappointed. I look at a tweet by a former NDP MP, Sven Robinson, who stated, the NDP caucus in 1970 under Tommy Douglas took a courageous and principled the NDPs under their leader, betrays that legacy and supports Liberals on the Emergencies Act. Shame, a very dangerous precedent is set. Madam Speaker, could the member please state unequivocally if he agrees that the new powers given the government
Jack
to
Layton were
seize
alive today,
bank accounts and freeze
I
bank accounts
guarantee
should be
you,
made permanent
the
for people
NDP
who
would
have
not
different
be
political
supporting
views
this.
than the government.
After
The,
Jack Layton passed away, the NDP
The honourable member for Coquitlam.
really
Thank you, Madam Speaker,
went
and I thank
off
the
the
member
rails.
for his question. I mean, certainly what we're facing today is a threat to our democracy, to our economy, and to peace, order, and good government in Canada.
Everybody
And this is
calls it the dirty
unacceptable.
schwa
The
with
measures
Media
that are brought
Snippet.
in
It's
place
just because
today or
it's
in recent days are time limited and
just a
subject
small
to
city outside of
ratification certainly
Toronto.
by this
It
Parliament,
used to
but
be a
also will be
very there were a lot of
will
car
be
manufacturing plants
brought before the
there.
courts in due course. I
Very
think that
like
we cannot make
there was a lot of shit. Just
a blanket
just
statement of the kind that he's proposing.
you know, your typical small city
Madame la
stuff.
Présidente, je remercie mon collègue pour son discours. Il a mentionné comme justification au recours à la loi sur les mesures d'urgence le fait que plusieurs personnes, notamment de ses employés, se font intimider.
Jack Layton was the only good thing about the NDP. Yep.
Pas plus tard qu'en décembre dernier, on a voté le projet de loi C3 qui visait à criminaliser l'intimidation de personnel soignant et de gens qui allaient recevoir des soins. J'aimerais savoir qu'est-ce qui justifie maintenant
Hamilton is known as dirty for the same reasons. Yep.
qui n'était pas justifié au moment de voter C3.
The honourable member for Coquitlam Port Coquitlam.
Madam Speaker, the Emergencies Act is brought into force at this time to deal with a very specific, focused, and narrow problem. One that has been brought, that has come to the fore
I
in
can
the
tell
last
I
several
completely
weeks.
forgot
And
my
that,
eye drops yesterday. My
law
eyes are
enforcement
all
officials have been unable, due
watery.
to conflicting jurisdictions and lack of resources, they have been unable to deal with appropriately. We've seen already during the course of the last day and continuing today, the ability of these law enforcement officials who are now enabled with the appropriate resources and
They had
cooperation
the
amongst
appropriate resources
member,
the whole
forces
time,
across
though.
the country
That's the point.
to be able to bring to the situation the necessary assets to put this situation back in the box and get us once again
In other words, I don't know why I'm supporting this. I'm
Comments, the
just
honourable
being
member
told
for
to.
Windsor West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And 2 kilometers from here is the Ambassador Bridge. And the Conservatives and Bloc like to say that things are fine. It's not. It is open, but now the Jersey barricades and the blockade is now on city streets and other areas. And the flow of traffic per day is hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's around 40,000 vehicles per day. Now, what's happened is trucks are lined up from the bridge now and slowed down all the way through the quarter, including to the member of Essex riding. They don't seem to care or appreciate the fragility with regards to how the just-in-time delivery system works, how many jobs
Stuff
are
can
lost.
actually
But I'd like to ask
move.
the member,
That's the
will his
point.
government at least support municipal supports that are going to get paid
Of
back by the
course
federal and
they
provincial
do.
government
They've
to pay for
already
these
said
policing
that.
costs and to assist the logistics
And
of
the
the
province of
organizations, companies,
Ontario
and groups that are
declared a
going to have
state of
a
emergency,
series
so
of
that's where the
delays and problems
municipality is
now
going to
just
get
for
their
now,
fucking
but for
money
weeks
from,
to
you
come
idiot.
to make up for the lost time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for
You're an
Coquitlam Port
MP. You
Coquitlam.
kind of should have had to
Thank you, Madam
figure out
Speaker.
all the,
I
you
would,
know, smaller levels of government before you got to
suggest to the
this
member
one.
that
No?
unfortunately they don't let me write the checks.
Jesus Christ.
But I certainly would support the assistance, the ongoing assistance of all levels of government that need help during this time, as we have been in place, we have been able to do during the course of the pandemic itself, to deal with emergent situations, to deal with emergencies as they arise, and so that we can all get through this in good order, safely as Canadians.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Willowdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity to take part in today's significant debate. After what we all witnessed on the streets of our capital yesterday, I feel compelled to say we each have a solemn obligation and responsibility to steer clear of excessive partisanship and rhetoric today. What we saw in our national capital should
Meanwhile,
serve
not a
as
peep
a
from them
sober
about the
reminder
terrorist attack
of
in
our
BC. Oh, there have
solemn
been some
obligation to
conservatives.
prove resolute
Somebody
in
mentioned that
exercising our
actually earlier
responsibilities
in debate.
and vigilant in safeguarding the interests of all Canadians. I firmly believe we must each endeavor to steer clear of division and resort to the principles that guide us in our decision with respect to the specific motion at hand. After all, At times such as this, Canadians are entitled to nothing less from their elected officials. The facts before us are not in dispute. Today marks the 23rd day of the blockade and occupation of Ottawa. Apart from entrenched encampments in Ottawa, we have witnessed weeks of protests at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor and at the border crossing at Coutts in Alberta. Each of these developments has represented a deliberate and concerted effort to stifle our commercial lifelines or to impede the flow of civic life.
No.
Our democratic right to protest or freely express our views is one thing. A blockade,
Never
entrenched
did I
occupation,
think I would quite
or
see the rise of a
permanent
dictator in my
gridlock
lifetime, but
is
here they
quite
are.
another.
Here we are. But and you know
Madam
what's crazy,
Speaker,
Lindsay?
let me
He's
say
not
firmly
here.
and unequivocally
He's not in the house
that it
today.
does not matter what an occupation
Trudeau is not
is about.
in the house
That is not what the motion
to be
before
part of
us
this debate.
is about. A protest is generally understood to be time limited and should never be allowed to devolve into an indeterminate occupation that completely ignores the rights of
But
others.
all of what
Our
you're
government
saying
has and should always
doesn't
listen
need the
to the
Emergencies
concerns
Act
of
to
all
fix.
Canadians.
We
Now,
have
Madam Speaker,
stuff in place
allow me
to fix
talk
this
about
shit
the
without
significance
putting
of
in
the
the
rule of
Emergencies
law.
Act.
We are blessed as a country and have served as a beacon to people around the world because of our unconditional adherence to the rule of law. I can tell you because that's exactly why I arrived here as a teenager with my family, because we were fleeing hateful ideology and extremism of a revolutionary government that had no regards for individual rights or the rule of law. The rule of law is at the core and the very foundation of who we are. The rule of law stands for the proposition that every person is subject to the law and must be held accountable.
Of course he's not
for
there.
their
He probably
actions.
shit himself
That's why
as
none
soon as
of
anyone
us
raised their
should
voice
turn a
at
blind
him.
eye
Yeah.
to what has been unfolding across our country or in our nation's capital in the last several weeks. Surely, members know that residents of Ottawa have been subjected to sonic assaults for weeks, nor can we overlook that many felt compelled to form citizen brigades against what was occurring here. We cannot remain indifferent to what we're hearing from the
let
residents
the
of Ottawa.
RCMP
The
do
members
their
of this House
thing.
are also
You don't
surely
need
familiar that
the
hundreds of
Emergencies
small
Act
businesses, many of which were
for
frequented
this.
by
You
the
don't.
members of this House, have felt compelled to remain closed for the past 3 weeks. Surely, we are better than that. We know that some of the protesters
and the point
were actually
is
jamming 911
that-
lines in the last several days.
How are they jamming 911 lines?
Canadians rightly expect
How?
our government to demonstrate resolve
And
in the
where
face
is your
of what
evidence?
we have experienced across our country. The only responsible course of action was to invoke the Emergency Act. We have been in contact with all levels of
Simply
government
enforcing the
here,
criminal
and
code
we
would
have
have been enough. They
consistently
barely
heard,
did that.
whether it
Yeah.
be the Chief of Police of Ottawa, the Mayor of Ottawa, or the Premier of Ontario, that the City of Ottawa is under siege, entirely overwhelmed and lacking the resources and tools to deal with the situation at hand.
So
Let me remind
fucking
every
do
member in the
something
House
about
that a
it.
state of
That
emergency
you
was
don't need the
declared by the City
Emergencies
of
Act
Ottawa
to
on
do
February
something
6th,
about this.
by the province of Ontario on February 11th, and the federal government on February 14th.
Yeah,
The
the fact
Emergencies
that
Act spells out a clear process. Despite much of what we have heard today, the Act is time limited and targeted and must at all times be applied in a reasonable and
why are
proportionate
none of
fashion.
you answering
That
how
does
long
not limit
how
anyone's freedom
limited
of expression.
and
Neither
why you
does
put
it
it
limit
in?
the freedom of peaceful assembly. The Act is replete with specific checks and balances. The legislation, as adopted in 1988, is circumscribed with layers of
Outside,
built-in
they have one more
protection
year at
to
most,
ensure
so
that
it's
our
been
charter
followed.
rights
Yeah.
are fully safeguarded at all times.
Yeah, where is
The
Doug
Progressive
Ford anyway?
Conservative
That's a good
government that
question,
introduced
Owen.
the Emergencies Act in 1988 ensured that the invocation of the Act be done in a charter compliant fashion. Now,
Yeah,
we heard a
regardless
lot
of the
from
outcome
members
of Ottawa,
opposite
we've
that
got
the facts do
a
not
year left.
justify invocation of the Emergencies Act. If the backdrop of developments in Windsor, Coutts, and Ottawa has not persuaded the honourable members, nor what we have heard from residents, the police chief, the mayor of Ottawa, and the premier of Ontario, they should consider the following. Let me assure you that the Act does not only require
He
a
already
sober
says he
assessment
wants
of
this to
what
be over, but
has
he's waiting on
happened,
the feds.
but a consideration of
Doug
possible
Ford,
threats on the horizon. When Perrin Beatty, a minister of the Conservative government, was asked in committee what justification was required to invoke the Emergencies Act back in 1988, this is what Mr. Beatty, a Conservative minister, had to say. It depends not only on an assessment of the current facts of the situation, but even more on judgments about the direction events are in danger of moving, about how quickly the situation could deteriorate. Mr. Beatty further added, judgments have to be made not just about what has happened or is happening, but also what might happen. When the measures were invoked by our government, it was clearly stated that the situation across our country is concerning, volatile, and unpredictable. I dare say not a single person in this chamber could possibly take issue with that assessment.
Okay,
so I would ask the members of this House not only to refuse to turn a blind eye to what we have seen,
going on
but also
that requires
not prove
extraordinary
deaf to the
measures.
assessment of the
Just
Ottawa Chief of
enforcement
Police,
of the stuff
the
that already
Mayor of
exists.
Ottawa, and the Premier of Ontario. As
Do they have a
passionate
psychic?
as we
Maybe.
can each be, we do not have license
Maybe they've hired.
to,
Maybe they've
allow,
reincarnated
our
Miss Cleo.
judgments to substitute for what we have overwhelmingly heard from public safety officials and national security experts over the course of the last several days. It's imperative that we actually consider this thing and that we look beyond this chamber to determine whether this has been justified or not. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. The Honourable Member Coriello? No. Sorry. Yes, but medal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Interesting comments. I'd like to compare and contrast for a second. New Zealand just announced on today's Ottawa citizens that they ruled out forcefully clearing vehicles blocking roads outside of Parliament in a protest against coronavirus mandates, saying it would cause wider harms.
In the Charter
They
of
said
Rights.
that negotiation and de-escalation were the only safe ways to resolve the protest, and he would continue to talk to protesters.
Yeah, we
As
do have
compared
checks and
to
balances.
the Liberal
Ours
government. Report to the House of Parliament, emergencies, the
Carlos
consultations they had.
our
58
countries are exactly the
consultations.
same except for
58
how our
consultations.
governments are
You
elected.
mentioned
Yeah,
a few.
we do
Not
like
one of them was
our
the
we do
protesters.
have
My
very
question is
like
this:
our laws
did
are
they
very
purposely
similar.
allow this to
They're just
continue so they could
really
crack down
just
on Canadians that they
like
don't agree
worded
with?
differently,
Thank
but
you.
they mean the same thing. Like our Charter of Rights is basically
But I really think
your
it's
Bill of
imperative
Rights. It's just
that
worded
rather than look at developments in New Zealand
differently,
that
and
we
like
look
you
at
guys
developments
have
in our own country, and that
the
we
freedom
listen
of
to what
speech,
experts are saying. We listen
press,
to what
religion,
all three levels
right?
of government
Ours
in this city
gets
and in
more
this province
wordy
are
and is
saying.
like freedom of
It is
conscience,
imperative
freedom of
that we
religion,
continue to
freedom of
communicate
expression,
and that we
which
assess the
is speech,
situation and do
freedom
everything
of
that is
the
necessary.
press, freedom of assembly, blah blah. Like it's just a wordier version of the Bill of Rights, basically.
My mask was caught up in my glasses. It's a very passionate debate today. I understand
Yeah,
that,
even
but
New
I
Zealand
would
says to
prefer
knock
to
it
look
off.
at
Yeah.
this rationally. And rationally means that what is happening today is that Emergencies Act is
Yeah, a
being
separation of
used across the
powers. Yeah.
country, in Quebec as well. And I thank my honourable colleague for his speech. Have said that we had to listen to some politicians in Ontario. And I would say to listen to some politicians. All the politicians.
I have fat
in fact, the National
fingeritis.
Assembly, in fact, asking for Quebec to be excluded from the act. This is not the case today, Madam Speaker. Rationally speaking, I would ask my friends if in 10 years, I apologize, there's something, some noise. I don't know what's happening.
OK. Je peux continuer?
May I
Ça m'a
continue?
déconcentré.
It's
De façon
just,
rationnelle, dans 10 ans, s'il y a un gouvernement de
in
droite
10 years,
qui
if
est
a
à la tête
government
du gouvernement du Canada,
is in power, and there is a movement, a left-wing movement, for example, that wants to demonstrate and block pipelines being built, it could use the decision
That's correct, and we vote for
government has
party
taken
rather
today
than
in
president.
2022
Yeah.
and say, well, it's already happened back in 2022 under a Liberal government. So today,
Je donne la
I
chance à
must
l'honorable
give
député
the
de
honourable
Willowdale de
member
répondre.
for Willowdale the opportunity to
The
respond.
honourable member for Willowdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and allow me to thank my colleague for his considered question. On this particular note, allow me to say this. I think it is imperative that as Canadians, we thank the detachment that arrived in the city of Ottawa yesterday. They did a splendid job, 7 different detachments. So we're grateful for what the province of Quebec has done. But insofar as your question is concerned,
questions.
Yes, my apologies. But allow me to assure the member that I truly do believe that we're not supposed to look at the substance of what is going on when there is an occupation or there is a lengthy protest.
We're not?
It is imperative that we continue to stand up for all Canadians.
Honourable member for
Okay,
Winnipeg Centre.
but
And I'd like to thank my honourable colleague
But-
for his intervention.
but
He mentioned
there are-
turning a blind eye,
I'm
and I would
confused.
agree. I think as a result of this government turning a blind eye, certainly the mayor of Ottawa, the police service, now we find ourselves in a crisis. And we saw this coming. We had all sorts of signs. I feel quite hesitant and to have to support this, and I absolutely support the Canadian Civil Liberties Association for wanting oversight. I think the fact that we're using this emergency measure absolutely requires oversight. But I think there's a reason why we arrived here, and I'm wondering through you, Madam Speaker, if the member agrees with me that we need a public inquiry in terms of governance issues that led us down this security.
No
down
more
this security
fucking
hole.
inquiries. No more fucking committees. No more. No more.
Okay, well, yes,
Get
please
this
do
done.
not rise if you
Get
sound on
this
a point
out.
of order because we interrupted the question. The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
So I'm just wondering if through you, the honourable member agrees that we need a public inquiry into policing and governance issues that led us to where we are right now.
Dale in 15 seconds.
Absolutely. Again, allow me to
This is
thank the
so
member for her
fucking-
question.
No
I agree
more
wholeheartedly.
freaking inquiries.
But the member
No
can take comfort
commissions,
in the
no
fact
committees.
that the legislation, as it is
No
currently drafted
reports.
and as it was envisioned in 1988, requires that we do that review. In addition, the city of Ottawa has decided to do a review.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Halliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Come on. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It is always a privilege to rise in this place and speak. But today I'm speaking and I'm going to lay out my case as to why I'm voting against continuing the Emergencies Act. In the past 34 years since the inception of the Emergencies Act, there have been 4 times where a national crisis was faced by a prime minister, and they each refused to implement the act.
Yep.
Brian Mulroney didn't do it during the 2-month Oka standoff outside Montreal in 1990.
Yep.
Jean Cartrand didn't need to invoke it after the terrorist attack of 9/11. Stephen Harper didn't during the 2008 banking crisis. And the Prime Minister didn't use it during the first 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic, which saw 35,000 deaths and the worst economic contraction since the Great Depression. For the first time in Canadian history, Speaker, a Prime Minister will use the Emergencies Act when authorities already have every legal tool at their disposal to deal with the situation before us today.
Yep.
For
Absolutely.
me, there are many concerning parts of the act now being used, including instructing financial institutions to seize assets and freeze bank accounts without due process. And as of this moment, the public safety minister has said 76 bank accounts worth a combined $3.2 million have been frozen.
Oh my God.
There are serious consequences of evoking this
That's
act,
crazy.
and ones that all parliamentarians need to reconcile with themselves before the vote on Monday. After 21 days of refusing to deal with the protest through a more civil and peaceful process, the government chose an act, the most heavy-handed using the Emergencies Act.
Yeah.
Make no mistake, Speaker, I do not support hate, nor do I find any legitimate rationale for the existence of groups that perpetuate discrimination, violence, or hatred. I once again call on these blockades to end peacefully and quickly. My constituency staff, Speaker, who with unparalleled dedication and commitment have acted professionally and admirably during these trying times, have fielded hundreds of calls and emails from concerned and sometimes angry citizens.
I bet.
For example, Kenneth and Lois from Bob Cajun write, there is no reason for this act to be used except fear from the Prime Minister. This could have all been avoided if the PM would have been willing to listen. Another Kawartha Lakes constituent writes, I implore you not to support the Prime Minister in his attempt to enact the Emergencies Act. Not only is this a complete overreaction to the situation, one which, in my opinion, was brought about by the Prime Minister's refusal to listen to the convoy and also serves no one's best interests. That was
But these are, but
we believe the government has overstepped their authority and are taking away our rights and freedoms, writes Peter and Lois. Now, of course, this is just a small sample and cross-section of hundreds of similar messages that I'm sure we all in this House are receiving. These are the words of ordinary Canadians who fear the government has overreacted because of the failed leadership of this Prime Minister.
Yep.
The act is clear when it should be implemented.
No confidence vote on Monday, please.
Seriously
Come on.
threatens the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada, and when the situation cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law in Canada. Speaker, the first question before us is whether the blockades seriously threaten Canada's sovereignty or territorial integrity, and whether there were no laws to deal with the protesters. The onus, Speaker, is on the federal government to demonstrate that the act was the only situation, the only option left on the table. National security experts have been expressing their concerns. For example, Leah West, a professor and national security expert at Carleton University, told the CBC that Canada was not facing the kind of public emergency
When
that
the mob
the
was
act
blowing up
designed to
places in the
respond to,
90s, nobody
stating,
invoked it.
I'm
Yep.
kind of shocked, to be honest, that the government of Canada still actually believes that this meets the definition to
Running
even
around calling
invoke
everyone a
the act.
terrorist is not going to
Adding,
solve anything.
I have real
Exactly,
concerns
shouting
about
at clouds.
fudging the legal thresholds to invoke the most powerful federal law that we have. Surely, Speaker, if there was a serious threat to our nation, provinces would be clamoring to the government for help. Yet provinces have told the Prime Minister they don't need the act. They already have dealt with their protesters through listening and talking.
Yep.
It's here, Speaker, that I believe the entire debate hinges. Does the perceived threat that the government felt needed to be addressed, now that the provinces have their own capacity resolved, still exist, and therefore justify the invoking of this act?
No.
Furthermore, the second condition, that the situation cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law in Canada, has been disproven by the leadership displayed by many of Canada's premiers right across this country.
Again,
The
no.
provinces and their police services didn't need the extraordinary powers granted by the Emergencies Act because they had already the authority to deal with them. It's unfortunate that the Prime Minister refused to follow good governance practiced by those premiers. And it's no wonder, Speaker, that Canadians who have been writing and calling, not just me, but every member in this House, view this implementation of this act not under the auspices of protecting Canada, but rather of protecting the Prime Minister's political failure. We have heard that part of the justification for invoking the act was deliberate foreign extremist interference in our democracy. Yet, I haven't seen any evidence from the government to indicate foreign power organizations behind the protests here in Canada. In fact, in committee last week,
After this guy's speech is finished, I'm going to end because the vote isn't today, and I think I've shown you guys a fairly good snippet of what's going on here.
Part of the government's intention with the use of this act is also to track and reveal information regarding private individual financial transactions. This information is going to go to the RCMP, CSIS, and FINTRAC, and will suspend accounts without judicial process. And I led off my speech talking about that. It's actually quite concerning that the government will not tell Parliament if they consulted with the Privacy Commissioner regarding the use of this information. Kim Manchester, a managing director of financial intelligence training at company Manchester CF, in an interview with CTV, warns that flagging accounts could financially ruin those targeted and make it difficult for them to get any financial services in the future.
Yep.
She says it's very tough on people when the activities of the Canadian government can lead to the financial meltdown of individuals associated with these protests who are guilty by association, by directive, and not by judicial process.
Yep.
In the same interview, Vanessa Iafola, a crime consultant, said that the use of the measure was a serious deviation from the normal democratic process that we generally expect to see in Canadian society. This legislation was created to deal with terrorist organizations and transnational organized crime syndicates, not Canadian truckers. The Canadian Civil Liberties Associations, Noah, Mandels, and Aviv, is concerned that the act allows the government to create new laws, bypassing democracy under what they have called a national emergency, and they haven't presented any evidence.
No, they haven't.
This. In fact, that a national emergency is now required. The CCLA is suing the government for seriously infringing on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms of Canadians. Paul Wells and Maclean's on February 14th surmised this. I think the real explanation for today's announcement came from the finance minister, who said it's basically about the blocked Ambassador Bridge at Windsor. And inconveniently, it's not blocked.
Yep.
He goes on, we fought tooth and nail to protect Canada's privileged relationship with the United States during the NAFTA negotiations. And we stood up to the 232 tariffs. This is now the Deputy Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, that were illegal and unjustified. We won't let those hard-won victories be tarnished. The world is watching us. Our jobs, prosperity, and livelihoods are at stake, and that's why the government is acting. The Emergency Act, Speaker, is there to address extreme threats to Canada, not to protect the economy. In 1978, approximately 30 countries were in some form of state of emergency. It had risen to 70 by 1986, and by 1996, 147 countries had mechanisms to declare states of emergency.
Okay.
A disturbing global trend that Canada now has the dubious honor of joining. It is probably no coincidence that this historic announcement came only an hour after the government narrowly defeated the Conservative motion by proposing that the government present a plan by the end of the month to lift federal mandates. The Prime Minister could see the writing on the wall as his own caucus had started to revolt against him. Rather than taking the diplomatic route, talking with the protesters, using the same media methods he used to call them names, lowering the temperature, letting those with concerns know they've been heard, laying out a plan to end the mandates and the restrictions, like many provinces across the country, like many countries around the world. He dug in his heels and then brought out the sledgehammer,
doubled down,
opposing the powers of this Emergencies Act, and it sets a dangerous precedent. Most concerning of all, young Canadians who have no direct connection to the historic struggles against fascism, socialism, and communism are losing faith and interest in freedom and democracy. And those noble ideals have been tarnished, and it's contributing to what we're seeing today. So I'll leave you with a few quotes. There will be a time later to reflect on all lessons that can be learned from this situation. This is from the Prime Minister. He told reporters last Monday afternoon. And I would argue these lessons already exist, Speaker. We don't have to go that far in history to look back and find them.
Questions?
All right, guys. So I'm going to end here. And because I'm pretty sure I've showed you guys a good snippet of what's going on here. So please, I hope you guys enjoyed this. And on Monday, because it is family day, Pinkala will be home. So depending on when the vote is, I will either use the coffee stream to cover that, and or I will do an extra stream. So either or. I just keep an eye out on that. So it will either be during the coffee stream, or I will do a separate stream for the vote. Also, please come back later today at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Star Trek stream. We're going to be talking about Trek tropes today. And also, please come by. I'm going to type it in chat, actually. My buddy Blind Sito's Twitch channel. I would like you guys to come by at 8 p.m. Eastern, because there is a blind King of the Hill for Mortal Kombat 11 being hosted by Blind Cito, and I am going to be in it. Of course, I will probably, well, not probably, I will be getting my ass handed to me because Rattlehead's in it, and a bunch of really good players are in it. But, you know, it's always fun to play in those, and I haven't done a King of the Hill with the guys since October, I think, or October, November, something like that. So I'm going to be doing that tonight at 8 p.m. As soon as I get to the end of the fucking comments here on the computer, I will write Blind Cito's Twitch channel in the chat, because holy crap, there's a lot of stuff here. I'm glad that we had a good stream. It was very, very good. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Where are we? You know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna type it in. Twitch /TV/ Blind Cito. There. Go there tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern to watch me and a bunch of other blind guys play MK11. It'll be lots of fun. So thank you for watching, and be back at 5 p.m. Eastern for Trek Tropes. I'll see you guys then. Have a great afternoon, guys. Thanks for watching.